My name's Jim Lewis. Thanks for coming to CSIS this morning on a rainy Washington day, tail end of a hurricane, I think. I was preparing for this and I found a quote by Alfred North Whitehead, who most of you have never heard of, but was a big philosopher in 1900. And he wrote that we make advances by extending the number of important operations we can perform without thinking of them. That was more than a century ago, so automation is not particularly new. This is a new flavor of automation, and in some ways it's very different. Now, if we had named artificial intelligence advanced software tools, which is really what they are, but no one wants to make a movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger with about advanced software tools, so we'll call it AI for the rest of the day. We have a full schedule, and so I thank my colleagues from the Department of Justice for proposing this and for organizing it, and looking forward to the speakers. Let me go through the list real quickly. We're going to talk about crime, civil rights, facial recognition, which is my own pet topic, and governance, AI governance. We have three panels: AI and crime, AI and governance at DOJ, and international law and AI. We have three lightning talks. This is shorter talks than usual on cryptocurrency and civil rights, also topics that I really want to hear about. We have 4 keynotes. This is an ambitious program. Ambitious, but we're going to make it work, and you're going to help. Thomas Schneider, chair of the Committee on AI at the Council of Europe, so we appreciate him coming. Jacqueline McGuire, FBI Chief AI Officer. Congressman Don Beyer, my congressman, so I'll read you his bio later. Although I'll say one thing about Don Beyer. I was at another event on AI, of course, and it was closed. He said he's taking courses on AI at George Mason University. How many other congressmen do you know who are studying the stuff they're doing? Amazing. He'll be here for lunch. And finally, we have Nicole Argentieri, Principal Deputy Attorney General of the Criminal Division. Nicole has a long and distinguished career. Her bio will be on our website. She comes initially from corporate law and then came to, what was the Eastern Division? Eastern District, which is the exciting district, right? And now is at the Department of Justice as the Principal Deputy Attorney General for the Criminal Division, which is always close to our hearts. What we'll do is we'll have Nicole come up, then we'll move to the first panel and take it from there for what should be a fun day. Nicole, please come up. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. Good morning. I'm Nicole Argentieri, the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division. And I'd like to thank the Center for Strategic and International Studies and our very own Computer Crime and Intellectual Property section, CSIS, for the opportunity to address this symposium. And this is such a timely discussion. The promises and perils of artificial intelligence are top of mind for the Criminal Division and for the Department of Justice more broadly. As I expect others will discuss today, these new technologies offer important opportunities to enhance our investigations and for law enforcement to become more effective and efficient carrying out our core mission to protect the public and uphold the rule of law. The department has already deployed AI to triage reports about potential crimes, to connect the dots across large data sets, and to identify the origin of seized narcotics. As with any transformative technology, AI also presents risks for misuse, especially as generative AI makes it easier for criminals to commit crimes and harder for all of us, law enforcement and civilians alike, to know what is real and what is not. For example, criminals can take advantage of the trust that we place in a family member's voice or a celebrity's image to mislead and defraud people out of their life savings. Predators have used AI to turn innocent pictures of real children into child sexual abuse material. And of course, cyber criminals can exploit open-sourced AI models to create chatbots that write more targeted and effective phishing emails and malicious code. Now, in many ways, this is not a new challenge. Criminals have always sought to exploit new technology. But while their tools may change, Our mission does not. The Criminal Division will continue to work closely with its law enforcement partners to aggressively pursue criminals, including cybercriminals who exploit AI and other emerging technologies, and to hold them accountable for their misconduct. And as Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco has announced, where misconduct is made significantly more dangerous by misuse of artificial intelligence, department prosecutors will seek stiffer sentences. To reaffirm our commitment and articulate our strategic approach to combating cybercrime and other offenses using emerging technologies, I am excited to announce that today, the Criminal Division is releasing a new strategic approach to countering cybercrime. It's easy to find on the CSIS website, cybercrime.gov. The strategic approach to countering cybercrime emphasizes the division's focus on using all tools to disrupt criminal activity and hold criminal actors accountable, including by developing law and policy to prevent and prosecute cybercrime, promoting cybersecurity through capacity building and public education. It also highlights the division's expertise in collecting and using electronic evidence. CSIS is a leader in the division and the department's efforts to combat technology-enabled crime, including crime facilitated by artificial intelligence. As set out in our strategic approach, CSIS, working with offices across the department and our law enforcement partners, including our domestic and international law enforcement partners, is focused on pursuing three critical goals. First, leading the department in deterring and disrupting cybercrime, such as ransomware schemes, through criminal prosecutions, seizures of criminal infrastructure, and other enforcement actions targeting the most significant cybercriminal activity. Second, ensuring the department has effective tools and policies to combat cybercrime, making sure that we put victims first and that we protect civil rights in our cybercrime enforcement work. And third, promoting national cybersecurity and the government's ability to address cybercrime through capacity building, public education, and information sharing. While the strategic approach we're announcing today may be new, the Criminal Division has long been focused on combating cybercrime and crimes enabled by emerging technologies. I would like to take this opportunity to pause for a moment to highlight some of the work that we have already done to advance each of our strategic approach's three goals. Now, first, our strategic approach emphasizes the importance of targeting the most significant cybercrime actors. We in the Criminal Division have a long track record of successful cyber disruptions and prosecutions against prolific cybercrime groups. In just the past year, the Criminal Division has partnered with the FBI and other investigative agencies to conduct highly successful enforcement activity against ransomware actors, botnet administrators, and other groups that infect victims' computers with malicious software, and cryptocurrency money laundering operations. To just talk about a few of those successes, these actions included disrupting notorious ransomware groups like Lockbit and Alpha V Black Cat, which were the world's first and second most prolific ransomware variants. They collectively targeted over 2,000 victims. Working with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey, the FBI, and partners around the world, we seized control of Lockbit's infrastructure, charged its creator and administrator, and convicted key Lockbit affiliates. In partnership with CSIS and the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida, the FBI developed and implemented a decryption tool that saved multiple victims from ransom demands by Alpha V and Black Cat, and that totaled over $68 million. We also dismantled botnets, those networks of computers that are infected with malicious software, and that without their owners' knowledge are controlled by criminal actors. Earlier this year, we worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Texas and the FBI to dismantle the 9/11 S5 botnet, which had infected millions of residential computers worldwide. The botnet's administrator generated millions of dollars by selling access to the infected computers to cybercriminals, who then used their computers to commit billions of dollars in fraud, to carry out cyber attacks, to access child exploitation materials, and to make bomb threats. And alongside the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Washington, D.C., we recently successfully prosecuted prolific cryptocurrency money laundering operations, including convicting at trial the operator of Bitcoin Fog, the longest-running Bitcoin laundering service on the darknet. Now, while we are super proud of these successes, we know our work is not done. We remain especially vigilant about the next generation of technology that criminals are employing to commit cybercrime. Because, as we all know, bad actors are already exploiting artificial intelligence for criminal purposes. Just a few weeks ago, the Criminal Division's Child Exploitation and Obscenity Section, fondly called CSIS, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Alaska charged an Army soldier stationed in Anchorage who allegedly used AI to morph pictures of real children, including children that he knew, into images depicting their violent sexual abuse. According to court documents, the defendant used online AI chatbots to create those images. And in May, following a tip from a major social media company to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which prompted a swift and thorough investigation by our CSIS prosecutors, a grand jury indicted a Wisconsin man for producing thousands of illicit images of prepubescent minors with generative AI, and then distributing those images to a minor. According to court documents, the defendant generated these images wholly through AI using specific, sexually explicit text prompts. Using AI to produce sexually explicit and increasingly photorealistic images of children is illegal, and we will not hesitate to hold accountable those who possess, produce, or distribute AI-generated child sexual abuse material. The second part of our strategic approach also emphasizes the Criminal Division's role in ensuring the department has effective tools to combat cybercrime and that we protect civil rights in cybercrime investigations. The investigations and prosecutions that I've just described illustrate that the criminal misuse of AI is not a domestic problem. It's a global concern. Cybercrime is increasingly transnational in nature. Criminals, the infrastructure they use to carry out their criminal schemes, evidence of their misconduct, and victims of criminal schemes can be, and often are, located in other countries. Now, we have always relied on our international relationships and partnerships in our fight against cybercrime. That is why we designated an experienced CSIS prosecutor to act as the Cybercrime Operations International Liaison, or COIL, DOJ loves an acronym, to build and strengthen partnerships with key foreign partners and coordinate major international cyber operations. That is also why the Criminal Division was pleased to participate in negotiating the first international agreement encouraging governments to use artificial intelligence in responsible ways that respect civil rights. The Council of Europe convened these negotiations, which resulted in a first-of-its-kind treaty. The treaty provides an opportunity for rights-respecting governments to set forth a shared baseline for how we will use AI in a way that is consistent with respect for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. It codifies key principles related to AI, such as transparency, accountability, non-discrimination, reliability, and privacy. It establishes minimum risk management practices and a forum for like-minded democracies to coordinate on AI's impact. I could say more, but we're very lucky today to have Thomas Snyder here with us to further discuss the treaty and the need for global rules around the government use of AI that aligns with all of our shared values. Of course, the AI Treaty was not the only recent effort undertaken by the Criminal Division to memorialize global rules that align with civil rights. I also could not be more proud of the Criminal Division's role in negotiating and drafting the UN Convention Against Cybercrime. The convention was recently advanced by consensus at the United Nations by more than 150 member states. If the General Assembly ultimately adopts the convention and member states join it, The convention would significantly advance the department's ability to fight cybercrime and crimes involving child sexual abuse material, while also providing unprecedented protections for human rights. The convention would expand the global fight against cybercrime and crimes against children and deal a blow to cybercriminals and nations that give them refuge. By expanding the United States' ability to obtain evidence and extradite defendants from foreign countries, the convention would make it much harder for Russia, China, Iran to shield cybercriminals, including state-sponsored hackers, from the US criminal justice system. Under the convention, we would have better access to evidence located abroad, and cybercriminals would have fewer places to hide. The convention would also enhance our ability to investigate and prosecute those who possess, distribute, and create child sexual abuse materials, including materials that sexually exploit American children. While our adversaries had hoped for an agreement that would enshrine authoritarian values, the convention that we have negotiated would do the opposite. It would codify in international law a requirement that cooperation under the convention may take place only with respect to cases that do not suppress human rights or fundamental freedoms. I look forward to continuing to work with our interagency international partners in the global fight against cybercrime, which is one of the most pervasive challenges of our time, affecting communities across the world. Finally, the strategic approach's third goal is focused on promoting cybersecurity through capacity building, public education, and information sharing. Among the many things that the Criminal Division is doing to advance cybersecurity, we are actively building relationships with AI companies to better understand how criminals are exploiting AI and identify ways that the private sector can work with the department to combat criminal activity on their platforms. These relationships are essential. The private sector has a critical role to play in addressing the criminal misuse of AI. I am encouraged to see that many companies developing AI products are proactively working to do so with safety and security in mind. Last year, the government secured voluntary commitments from major developers of generative AI models to promote the safe, secure, and transparent development and use of their technology. These commitments contemplate investments in cybersecurity and security testing, including facilitating third-party discovery and reporting of vulnerabilities in their AI systems. We in the Criminal Division have long recognized the importance of security research. We have encouraged vulnerability disclosure programs for exactly this reason. Encouraging and facilitating third-party discovery and vulnerability reporting has been an important way of bolstering cybersecurity. To that end, entities in the public and private sector have adopted and expanded mechanisms for reporting vulnerabilities that are discovered by security researchers and penetration testing companies. Much of this research, even if it's conducted by third parties, can be lawful when it's conducted in good faith and without doing harm. That is why we supported CSIP's recommendation that the United States Copyright Office consider clarifying its exemption for good faith security research to ensure that the exemption applies to AI systems and similar algorithmic models. That would include research into bias and other harmful and unlawful outputs of such systems. Companies that have not signed on to the White House's voluntary commitments for leading AI companies, which include facilitating third-party discovery and vulnerability reporting, should consider implementing a vulnerability disclosure program or extending their existing programs to cover their new AI products. In fact, independent research on the functioning and security of AI systems, it's often referred to as red teaming, AI red teaming, will be essential to ensuring the integrity and safety of AI systems, in much the same way that computer security research more broadly has helped to protect the integrity of computer systems and networks worldwide. AI red teaming has an additional important role to play beyond ensuring the security of AI systems. It can also help protect against discrimination, bias, and other harmful outcomes. As AI becomes more prevalent in our lives, it is critical that we do not let it undermine our shared national principles of fairness and equity. Good faith research can help identify systems whose operations or outputs are unsafe, inaccurate, or ineffective for their intended uses. And good faith research can protect against potentially serious harms to individual rights. When good faith research is done in the public interest, it should be encouraged, it should be supported. Fostering the responsible use of vulnerability testing and reporting is a crucial step toward mitigating the harms that might arise from these AI systems, and we stand ready to support it. That's why I am pleased to announce that the Criminal Division plans to take another step in support of AI research. CSIS is hard at work preparing a revised vulnerability disclosure framework, which will update the advice that we first published in 2017 to help public and private organizations create effective vulnerability disclosure programs. The original framework that we put out described how to build vulnerability disclosure programs for IT systems that accounted for issues that could arise under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It minimized legal jeopardy for security researchers. We are now revising that framework to address the reporting of vulnerabilities for AI systems and to contemplate issues that might arise under intellectual property laws as well. As we work to update this document, the Criminal Division, along with other department components, will engage with external stakeholders, including researchers and companies, to solicit feedback so that they may share any concerns that they have, including about the potential applicability of criminal statutes to good faith AI red teaming efforts. Although we believe that good faith research can coexist with the statutes that we enforce in the Criminal Division, we know that we are just at the beginning of this AI revolution, and there is much that is still unsettled in the world of AI, from some of the core technology to the technical details of AI systems and how research into them can most effectively be conducted. Let me conclude where I began. As Deputy Attorney General Monaco has said, AI is a double-edged sword. It can be used to detect, disrupt, and deter criminal activity, but it can also facilitate criminal activity by bad actors who would seek to exploit it and lower the barriers to entry for criminals. We must be vigilant in understanding this rapidly evolving technology. And the Criminal Division stands ready to take on this role by leading the department's efforts to combat the criminal misuse of AI, to uphold the rule of law, both at home and abroad, when it comes to government's use of AI, and to facilitate partnerships with the private sector to ensure that public interest research advances while malicious actors are held accountable. I am so glad that you are all here for this important discussion. I am deeply grateful to be here with you, and thank you again to CSIS, to CSIS, and to all of the speakers and participants for your work on this subject matter, but also on this event. And I look forward to the discussion today and in the months and years ahead. Thank you so much.
If I could ask the first panel to come on up, we can get started. Missing anyone? Where's Leonard? Oh, there he is. Good.
So good morning. My name is Leonard Bailey. I am head of the Cybersecurity Unit in the Computer Crime and Intellectual Property Section and Special Counsel for National Security. And this is the first symposium panel on artificial intelligence and crime. Now, you could pin the public groundswell and interest in artificial intelligence to somewhere around December 2022, June 2023. November 2022 was when ChatGPT was rolled out. And if you credit Google Trends, sort of June 2023 was when you saw sort of a peak of users' interest in searches that involved artificial intelligence and generative AI. Now, the initial media coverage of artificial intelligence in this phase, or at least media coverage that preceded this initial phase, was generally, I'd say, positive. You had headlines like, Project Syndicate, how an AI utopia would work in June of 2019. February of 2021, artificial intelligence for good, how AI is helping humanity from Forbes. But the more recent surge in public attention has really struck a more cautionary note. By 2023, mid-2023, June, you had headlines like the New York Times, how could AI destroy humanity? July 2023, what are the chances of an AI apocalypse? And obviously this was kind of spurred in part by the letter that was issued in June of 2023 by 35,000 AI researchers, entrepreneurs, and technologists who suggested a pause in AI development because of concerns. So as we sit here kind of in the waning months of 2024, we know we're somewhere between a utopia and Armageddon. And part of what this panel will try to flesh out is one facet of the question of really where are we in that spectrum? How bad is it? And this will be done through the lens of crime. What we'll be discussing are things like how are criminals exploiting artificial intelligence to commit crimes that are harder to detect, easier to commit, and require less skill. But we'll also be discussing the counterweight to that, and that is how is law enforcement, industry, and potential victims using artificial intelligence to help protect themselves, prevent crimes, and solve crimes. We'll also be talking about the trajectory of AI and what may result from that. And we'll be doing all of that with this terrific panel of experts who will provide a range of views, both from industry and from government. And to start off with, I'm going to ask them to just go down and quickly introduce themselves one by one.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chloe Mustagi, and my focus has been on AI safety and cybersecurity. I'm also one of the founding members of Disclose.io, which allows vulnerability disclosure policies across the world, and then also board member of the Diana Initiative, and I've been involved also with election security.
Hi there, I'm Steve Kelly. I'm the Chief Trust Officer at the Institute for Security and Technology. So we're a tech and cyber policy focused think tank that bridges the divide between technologists and policymakers on some of these challenging emerging security areas. My focus and my portfolio areas are AI, trust and safety, and some cyber security issues as well. I am a retired FBI agent. I've been out of the Bureau for a little bit over a year and had a couple of stints on the NSC staff in policymaking roles. Thanks for having me, Leonard.
Sure.
Thanks, Leonard. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ross Goldman. I joined the department back in 2012 in the criminal division in the appellate section, where I handled all manner of federal criminal appeals around the country and developed a specialty in cases involving child exploitation. About a year and a half ago, I moved over to the criminal division's child exploitation and obscenity section, CSIS, where I serve as senior policy and appellate counsel. My portfolio ranges from legal advising on the prosecution side, and then a number of policy initiatives, including thinking through both the policy initiatives and the legal issues surrounding the misuse of AI to generate child sexual abuse material. Happy to be here this morning. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning. I'm Alistair Reeder. I'm a senior counsel for emerging technologies with the department's Consumer Protection Branch, where I focus on developing criminal investigations involving technology, with a particular emphasis now on artificial intelligence. I'm also co-chair of a department-wide working group focused on coordinating resources for AI litigation and enforcement. And the Consumer Protection Branch is in the civil division, and we actually enforce civil and criminal authorities in a variety of consumer product, consumer safety, and fraud.
Terrific. Well, thank you to all of you for being here. I should also mention before we start that in the middle of your table, you'll find pieces of paper. If you have any questions, if you would please take a moment and jot them down and hold them up. They will be picked up, and we will get to as many questions as possible. And with that, let's start. Can I ask Chloe and Steve, could you maybe start with sort of an overview of what AI-enabled crime looks like today?
Would you want
Sure.
to
Let me
go
start,
for it? Go
and then-
for it.
And I'll pitch to you.
Yeah, let's go.
There's an enormous number of very interesting use cases for how AI capabilities can help in a crime scheme. And a couple of the most immediate ones that we're beginning to see already is generative AI being used to generate highly realistic, highly plausible phishing content. So in the past, it was pretty easy to identify whether a phishing email was in fact one, because the language was poor. It was clearly written by someone with a non-native speaking skills. Sometimes the context was off, and it was pretty easy to spot. And nowadays, all of this disadvantage to a foreign actor can be reversed. And so generative AI capabilities, even your basic chat GPT, can help them to generate very effective language. And then, of course, there's a number of things that can be done with audio and video as well in those formats that can help with those types of schemes. Another area which we have reporting from a particular cybersecurity firm that has actually seen bad actors using Llama to analyze stolen information. And so this is a very interesting use case in the context of both state activity like espionage, but certainly ransomware and computer criminally motivated computer intrusion and data heist, is analyzing the information that's been stolen to decide what to do with it. And so a common problem for a ransomware actor is they've got access into lots of systems. They've gotten the content that's been stolen. Now the question is what to do with it. They have limited ability to negotiate with multiple parties, and so who do I start with first? What should the demand be? What are their weaknesses and vulnerabilities? If you have the ability to analyze that content in an effective way, it can help to spot some of those issues. So it's almost like taking a batch of stolen data and applying your intelligence requirements to it, saying, these are the things I'm looking for. These are the things that are most interesting to me. Give me the answer. As we've all now experiencing with just your normal internet search, you're seeing the AI summary come up. You can ask a question. Instead of having to pick through sources, it's giving you a compiled answer from a number of sources. That sounds normal, but that's actually very, very powerful and is going to actually make victimization at scale much more possible for the bad actors.
Yeah, I would say one area in particular we don't really talk about enough is manipulation of AI systems. What that looks like, for example, say you have a self-driving car and someone alters a stop sign by placing some stickers on it. The self-driving car doesn't go to a stop, it keeps going. And this was actually proven by researchers back in 2017. And now we have to also worry about scammers with these great deep fake technology that we have. In Hong Kong earlier this year, there was a financial worker who thought that they were talking to their chief financial officer and wired $25 million to this scammer. And then now you have to worry also about misinformation and disinformation with generative AI. You make things a lot easier. With the election coming up, as you can imagine, yes, we do have a problem in that area. Like earlier this year, if you're all familiar with the robocall of President Joe Biden, it was not him, by the way, basically called and left messages in New Hampshire letting voters know, please don't go and vote during the primaries. And then now you have to also worry about deepfakes when it comes to pornography. And what I mean by that is taking images from social media of girls and women and then putting in applications which undresses them and provides basically pornography content. And this has been going around the world, and numbers are going through the roof of these kind of cases, and they're traumatizing to everyone who gets involved, but especially what's going on in South Korea. People are calling it as an epidemic, an emergency. Girls and women are taking down pictures from social media, anything with their faces on it. They're also turning their social media platforms into private, and then sometimes just getting rid of them completely. People are afraid.
So what we've seen, it sounds like, are applications that span ransomware, business email compromise, non-consensual pornography. On the last one, let me spin to Ross. obviously the generation of child sexual abuse material is a big concern with generative AI. Could you talk to us a bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. And I think one place to start is there's nothing inherently new about an offender wanting to use technology to create pornographic material of either adults or children. What's new now is that the AI technology is both cheaper, easier to use, and produces, from an offender's perspective, much better, more photorealistic outputs than the technology that existed 10, 20 years ago. And that has resulted in a massive increase in the amount of AI-generated child sexual abuse material that's out there. And we see it in a couple of different contexts. One is the deepfake scenario. So we see, for example, adult offenders who will take a benign image of a kid they know, an actual child, for example. It could be a picture they took at the neighborhood playground or at the baseball field or at the beach or whatever. And using AI to manipulate that image to make it appear as though that kid is engaging in sexually explicit conduct. So that's one iteration or one manifestation of the problem. We also see, and this has a whole nother layer of complexity to it, but kids doing this to other kids. We see this in schools increasingly commonly, where kids will take an image of a classmate, use AI to manipulate that image to make it appear again as though that classmate is engaged in sexually explicit conduct, and then do who knows what with it. Share it among their friend group, put it online, try to sell it, whatever the case may be. That's a whole nother layer of complication, because when you have an adult doing this to a child, oftentimes they're doing it for purposes of sort of the adult sexual gratification, and there's a sort of federal criminal infrastructure that can deal with that problem. When you have minors doing this against minors, it presents much more complicated sort of legal and policy questions about what's the best response from the Department of Justice, state and local authorities, school-based professionals, parents and caregivers. So we see this problem, again, exploding. The other thing we're seeing, and this relates to the deepfake, I'll use the acronym CSAM for child sexual abuse material, is it is exacerbating what we see as this sextortion crisis. So let me just make sure everyone understands what sextortion is. Sextortion is a crime where, and it's by and large in the United States, the victims are early to mid-teenage boys. And an offender, could be a US-based offender, could be part of a criminal syndicate overseas, will target this minor in the US, pretend to be usually a girl, and start a conversation on a social media platform or a messaging app. Sort of a flirtatious conversation. Maybe the girl will send a sexually explicit picture of herself to the target and sort of persuade the targeted minor to send a picture in return. As soon as the minor sends that picture in return, the switch flips and the girl reveals herself to be an extorter and demands either more imagery, oftentimes money, or could be anything, on threat that if the child victim does not comply, the offender is going to release that image to all the child's Instagram contacts, parents, coaches, religious leaders, teachers, whatever the case may be. So this has been a problem. There's been upwards of 20 suicides in the US over the last couple of years as a direct consequence of sextortion. What AI is doing, again, remember the sextortion crime typically has started with an offender needing to persuade the victim to send that image. AI has removed that barrier, right? So now an offender can generate through AI a deepfake image of that minor, contact the minor and say, if you don't pay me the money, send me actual pictures of yourself or whatever, I'm going to release this to everyone you know. Now the minor knows, right? That's not me. I know that's not me, but that's reasonably enough, very small, if any, comfort to the minor who is being relentlessly threatened by the sextorter. And oftentimes is finding ways to handle it themselves, pay the money, send the additional imagery, whatever the case may be. So we're seeing this as a real problem. That's the kind of deepfake thing. And then we also see what, for lack of a better word, what we'll call sort of pure AI CSAM, which is, imagine an AI platform that's a text to image system. So an offender will type in, show me a picture of, pick your scenario, child and adult. And some of these platforms will produce an image in response to that prompt, and then that image exists. And again, going back to the ease of use of this technology, offenders can do this at scale. Lots of images in a short period of time and then do who knows what with them. That leads to a whole host of other problems. Even though there's no actual child, we have very real concerns about impeding sort of victim rescue efforts, right? We see an image of a child being victimized. There is an infrastructure designed to identify and help that child. We definitely don't want these limited rescuers spending their time chasing kids who don't exist. And we have lots of other concerns about normalizing the behavior using this AI-generated imagery to groom or lower defenses that kids actually have. So that's kind of, a rough kind of sketch of what we're seeing right now.
Great, and I'd like to get to a discussion about how the child pornography and obscenity laws apply to generative AI, but let's hold off on that until we talk about gaps in the law. Also, I wanted to hear the Consumer Protection Branch, along with 8 other agencies, the Department of Justice's Consumer Protection Branch, along with 8 other agencies, have signed on to sort of address various issues that flow from automated systems. Could you talk a bit about how, let's say, AI-enabled fraud fits into that effort?
Yeah, so I want to give credit to the Civil Rights Division that has led that interagency group focused on algorithmic bias and machine learning and how it could impact civil rights. And our office signed on to that. We also started an emerging technology initiative, which is focused on these kinds of cases. I really agree with what everyone said here. We are seeing, in terms of actual reports to the department, places where AI technology is being used to, scale consumer frauds to a new level of sophistication. And perhaps even more worryingly is that makes them often more effective at targeting vulnerable people. The kind of cases that we do when we're doing our best work involve large victim populations, and that's what AI enables, right? You could take a scam where you would target one person, and now you can target thousands or millions. And those are cases that bring a lot of attention and a lot of concern. You're seeing that practically speaking in almost every type of traditional scam, whether it's a romance scam where voice and video impersonation can make it incredibly effective. Grandparent scams, you've probably read about them in the news. Grandparents thinking they're speaking to their grandchild because of widely available voice cloning technology. Investment scams, like Chloe mentioned, these are proliferating, and just like everyone is experimenting with AI, so are bad actors. And I think that we're sort of scratching the surface of where that could go. So the other piece of that, though, is that we've been talking very specifically about sort of bad actors. An international actor who's trying to engage in sextortion is one thing. But the other thing that we're really focused on is making sure that facilitators of these kinds of crimes, people who build AI and release it, that they are paying attention to the harm that's being caused. Our criminal laws tend to penalize knowing conduct. And so the branch has a lot of experience pursuing facilitators of crime, which is often large corporations. And we're very aware of the impact that these kinds of technologies can have on broader society. And where there's an AI provider who knows that their tool, which they're releasing publicly, is causing a specific type of harm, economic or other harm, we're very concerned about that. And we're trying to bring our regular tools to bear.
Okay, so the answer to the question of how bad is it seems to be there are serious concerns here. Let me flip that a little bit. Are there any sort of misconceptions about the effectiveness of these tools or how pernicious this is that we should highlight as well? Anything that's essentially overplayed?
So I think in the short term, the use cases are fairly defined and limited. I think that in the cybersecurity area, there's kind of this concern about whether this is going to tip the offense-defense balance significantly and make it very difficult to defend against computer intrusions and other cyber crimes. And state actor threats, frankly. I think IST is on the verge of publishing a report in the next week or so. So I'll tease that, so check out our website looking for that. But we studied that very topic. And I think in today's space, the use of AI by bad actors is kind of along the lines of what we described in terms of like the phishing content and data analysis and summarization. We don't yet see fully automated and orchestrated AI-generated cyber attacks. I think right today, the advantage rests with the defender. There's a lot of these options that allow for defenders to be able to take advantage of and harness the capabilities of AI in defending their networks and spotting these issues. But the first mover advantage right now is with the defender, but I think that is going to increasingly be challenged over time. So is it overplayed? No, I don't think so. But we have to be very intentional about how we keep track of how these capabilities are developing. What are the guardrails and other measures that are being put on AI capabilities being generated by responsible societies? How do we keep those technologies out of the hands of bad actors? And at a minimum, how do we make sure that we're staying at pace to prevent the bad outcomes? But what the future bears, it's going to be quite interesting, and I can't quite predict what the long-term outlook is.
Mm-hmm. And we'll be asking you about that in a moment. We were talking a little bit now about how AI is being maybe used against criminals. Let me move a little bit to gaps in the law, like what sorts of gaps we may see. There's a sort of storied instance in 1996 of Judge Frank Easterbrook giving a speech at University of Chicago entitled Cyberspace and the Law of the Horse. The supposition was we have many general laws that apply to specific instances. We have horses that we sell. We have horses that kick people and cause harm. We have horses that get substandard veterinarian care, and there are remedies for that. But we don't have a law of the horse. We have general laws that apply to all this, and his argument in 1996 was there was no need for specific laws in cyberspace to address those harms. I'm not sure that he has the better of that argument today as we look back, but I guess the question to the panel is AI a horse? That is, are there specific laws that we need? Are there gaps in the current laws that we have? Let me start with Alistair and Ross on that.
My best answer is maybe. I think that we're very focused on enforcing the laws we have. Certainly in the fraud context, the fraud laws, wire fraud, mail fraud, and others are very broad, and they tend to cover conduct where people intentionally cause harm to deceive and cheat people. There are other, legal structures out there beyond just the criminal justice system that approach these. The FTC, the FCC, state attorney generals, they all have very broad authorities to approach unfair or deceptive acts, and I think you're seeing an increasing amount of activity in the AI space to that. And I think the big question that underlies this is how do we apportion responsibility for the harms that are happening here? And is there a need to apportion responsibility for AI facilitated or enhanced crimes differently than we've done in other places? That's a really big question, and there's a wide variety of views on that. Everything from consumer product safety to Section 230, where people think that there's should be strong protections for the tech industry. And I guess our perspective is the misconduct that we recognize that falls within our laws, we'll try to thoroughly enforce. And some of this will have to play out over time as we see whether our laws fail to stop particular kinds of conduct.
And before you answer, Ross, could you take a moment to as I previewed, maybe set out what the legal framework is for generative AI and child obscenity and obscenity?
I'll try, yes,
okay.
For sure. So a couple of things are clear in the law, and then a couple of things are slightly less clear. So what's clear is that material that shows what the federal statutes call child pornography, that is sort of imagery of actual children engaging in sexually explicit conduct, that is unprotected speech. There's no First Amendment protection for that. Also very clear is there is no protection for speech that is obscene. And there's three-part test from a famous Supreme Court case that sort of applies to guide a fact finder's determination of whether material is obscene. It's got to appeal to the sexual interest. It's got to do so in a patently offensive way. And it has to lack serious artistic, literary, scientific, or historic value. So material showing an actual child, unprotected, obscene material, unprotected speech. In 2002, the Supreme Court considered a federal law that defined child pornography in part as material that is or appears to be that of an actual child. And this case is called Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition. And the Supreme Court said in that case that statute was unconstitutional in violation of the First Amendment because it did not require proof of an actual child, and the statute did not require proof of obscenity. So it created this sort of middle ground. Congress responded in 2003 with a statute that changed the is or appears to be language to is or is indistinguishable from that of an actual child. That provision has largely been untested in the courts. So that's the kind of legal sort of the First Amendment rules of the road here. What I can say, and going back, Leonard, if I can, just to your question about whether there are gaps in the law, and I appreciate the question because I want to take the opportunity to clarify that there, in our space, in the child exploitation space, there are not gaps in the law. We have the federal criminal tools that we need, and there is this narrative, and we started hearing it about a year or so ago, that maybe if the imagery didn't show a real kid, then it was legal, or wasn't obviously illegal. And this matters a great deal to us because we don't want the offenders to think that this is legal, and we don't want victims of deepfake imagery to think they have no legal recourse or that like they weren't actually victimized in the eyes of the law. And so how does it work? So for material that is a deepfake image, that is an image of an identifiable minor, we can prosecute that under the federal definition of child pornography. There's a separate definition that applies to that material. The courts have, the federal courts of appeals have sustained convictions under that theory against First Amendment challenges. So we feel very confident about that. After that 2002 decision in Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition, Congress passed a law, 18 U.S.C. section 1466 capital A. It's a federal obscenity statute. And it covers pure AI generated material that is obscene. It covers any material that is obscene. And so the way we generally think of it, and there are other theories of liability that we could bring to bear here, but I think the two biggest ones that I just want to make sure folks understand, or at least out there, are if it's an identifiable minor, we can prosecute under the child pornography statutes. If it's not, if it's pure AI, we can prosecute it under the obscenity statutes. And this isn't even just notional. We're doing these things right now. My office is currently prosecuting someone out in Wisconsin for AI-generated material under the obscenity statutes. We're prosecuting someone out in Alaska for engaging in deepfake material of actual children. There are prosecutions going back 10, 15 years on the deepfake stuff with actual kids. So this is what I mean when I say we have the tools, the federal criminal tools that we think we need to prosecute the offenders who traffic in sort of AI child sexual abuse material.
Okay. Before I go on, I want to just remind the audience again, if you have any questions, to jot them down and hold them up. Yes. Oh, please. Yeah.
As Ross was describing the scenario earlier in the discussion about non-consensual imagery being involved of a minor involved in an extortion scam, there may not be a gap in federal law to be able to address a scenario like that. But I'm concerned about the kind of the scale problem, where the federal system's not great, as you noted earlier, in handling issues involving minor offenders. We don't have a juvenile justice system as much within the federal system. And so I know that in a lot of cases we're relying on state and local authorities and prosecutors to be dealing with these types of things. But I think the amount of problem that's out there in the context of the schools and elsewhere is to the point where a local U.S. Attorney's Office and a local FBI office is not going to be able to handle and receive and put the proper attention into every complaint that comes in. We had a close family friend whose teenage son had that exact issue, and it's like, well, what should he do? Well, that's a real problem, and so I think there needs to be a lot of creativity around, how do we make sure that we push as much of that to the local level so it can be acted on quickly, nip it in the bud, and help these kids before bad things like suicides happen. So it is certainly a scale problem.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that at all. And we work the department, my office, myself, works really closely with with state and local counterparts on these issues. And maybe we'll touch on this a bit later, but the scale problem is such that we're not going to be able to investigate and criminally prosecute our way out of this problem. And so we are starting to dedicate increasingly more efforts on the prevention side, the sort of front end side, to equip kids with the information they need to try to keep themselves safe, and to equip parents and school-based professionals and others in children's lives on the sort of the nature of the problem and the things that they can do to try to keep their kids safe. It can't just be a reactive, a crime has happened, we need to respond to it. There needs to be front end work, and maybe we'll come back to this, but I'm heartened that there is actually meaningful front end work being done on these issues.
You made the case for investigating criminal facilitators, right? The scale is not just the issue of minors across the country generating, deep fake pornography, is that there was a tool built that let them do that in 5 minutes from their home computer for free, right? And so those kinds of tools, maybe there are people building those who don't know what they're doing, but there are also people building them who do. And I think that speaks to the importance of sort of law enforcement attention up and down the food chain of these scams, particularly where they're scaling.
So that, I think, pieces out some of the challenges we have. What are the impediments to doing better, Chloe?
I think one thing for sure is there's a lack of defining certain things, such as like, what is AI pen testing? What does that look like? What's in scope? So when we don't have this sense of all of us coming to understanding the definition of things, this makes things very tricky. But there's been a lot of attention drawn to deepfakes and generative AI, which is what's needed, but we also need to pay attention to also the risks that lay when we manipulate AI systems. For example, for those that aren't aware, who are these type of attackers? Well, it's nation state, it's cybersecurity, or not cybersecurity, it's competitors. And then also you have your cyber criminals. And what the motives are is simply to alter the AI itself. It is to bypass or evade the AI. It is to steal the AI or even the data, or the data and then also the model itself. And there are already cases of these things happening. It's not one of those things like, well, we'll get there when we get there. The thing is, they're already happening. For example, last year, ByteDance got caught trying to replicate ChatGPT. So these things are already occurring, but we need to talk about that more. And I think the executive, oh my God, I'm trying to remember the word for it, but
Executive order?
Thank you, the executive order. So the executive order came out, which was great, it's a good step forward, but we need a little bit more in that area for all of us to come together and understand all the different crimes and issues that we need to be focused on at this time, to try to get at these knowledge gaps that we're having.
So it's interesting because I think this actually dovetails with the statements that were made in the opening that AI platforms themselves are targets for attack because they, one, hold value themselves and they hold valuable information, and that may be another dimension of how we have to prepare. Are there other things that are impediments to us doing better? Also.
I think the speed of the technology continues to be an impediment. I mean, you laid out a timeline of the last 2 years. It's a pretty short period of time in law enforcement view, frankly. And the idea that those tools have changed enormously from just 2 years ago today, and they're iterative. The largest AI models, the most sophisticated ones, are developing every 2 or 3 months, and it is challenging for us to stay on top of that, both to know what the capabilities are, but also to understand how they work and how they can be abused. So I think that is an impediment, and that dovetails with sort of perhaps an existing impediment of the need to integrate technologists into our work, right? Like, we're only as good as what we understand. And I think that's something that his department is doing better at and is doing a good job at now, but it is an impediment. It's not like there's a technologist or data scientist in every office who can help advise on these topics.
Are there other?
Yeah, I'll share a thought. In order to develop an effective guardrail to prevent an AI system from doing or generating whatever that outcome is you're concerned about, you need to have a threat model and an evaluation regime to be able to test it. And so one thing I think that the prominent AI labs can use help with is kind of the imagination of what is that thing we're trying to prevent. We were working on some of this internal to our organization and coming up with some of these scenarios and then trying to figure out, well, how would you test that? But even coming up with the threat models requires an understanding of kind of the experiences that are occurring within this group, or understanding how bad actors on the cyber side are doing things, and being able to think ahead. In some cases, you don't know what you don't know. Therefore, you can't design a guardrail to prevent something you hadn't thought of. So the more people that are thinking about the ways that this can be abused, and then trying to reverse into what would the guardrail be, and then how do you test if it's effective, that would be incredibly helpful. Otherwise, some new idea comes up, somebody comes up with a new idea about how to abuse the model, and there's nothing that's going to prevent that because no one's thought of it yet. But these models are actually quite generally useful, and they can do things that they weren't necessarily particularly designed to do. You can ask it questions that nobody has thought of, and it can generate useful answers. And now with computer vision, with generating audio, generating video, and increasingly with agentic AI taking actions, the sky's the limit. And then one other challenge is not everything that we're talking about is being done in the context of a Claude account or a ChatGPT account. There are now instances of AI showing up in dark web marketplaces and dark corners of the internet where these systems are not within the governance structure of any major corporation. There are no guardrails, or it's even being designed to be able to fulfill a criminal purpose. Now, maybe they're not quite as capable as the things that we're seeing from the cutting edge AI labs, but it is a significant challenge.
Can I add on to that?
Absolutely.
There's even companies right now and individuals that are like, listen, we don't need guardrails. Why should we have guardrails? People are just going to exploit it anyway. Might as well not have any guardrails, and that's a really dangerous conversation to be having. But to piggyback on what you were saying, there is definitely some, the knowledge gap thing is a really big deal. For those that aren't aware of, if you're a data scientist or an ML developer, chances of you taking a security course at some point is very, very slim. And this becomes a problem because if you're not studying security, security is an afterthought. And cybersecurity folks are usually an afterthought. They come in after it's produced and it's already out there. So what does that mean? That means that you have data scientists and ML developers that are rapidly innovating and creating these incredible, complex, and amazing models, but never go through security checks because they themselves don't know about security. And then security folks have a huge knowledge gap because we haven't been trained either on data scientist type of coursework and neither on ML developer work. So there's this big concern here, growing concern, because if cybersecurity folks don't know how to secure these platforms, how are we securing these things that we're using in society? And that becomes a problem of its own as well.
So I'm hearing certain themes. I mean, I think there's some of this is classic in the area of technology, and that is technology is arguably a dumb beast that could be ushered into different directions, dual-use tool. And so there's nothing intrinsic in the technology. It's perhaps the policies that you wrap around it that are going to be the necessary driver for improvement. What do we feel about the pace of policy development in this area?
So in our space, the CSAM space, we're starting to see some positive developments, I think. There's a nonprofit organization called Thorn, for example, that developed a list of sort of voluntary principles that would guide sort of responsible AI platform production and maintenance, sort of a safety by design kind of idea. And a number of leading technology companies have signed on to those voluntary principles. The White House has put out some similar types of voluntary principles, best practices in this space that companies have joined. There is an effort underway with our office and others in the department to engage with willing technology companies to red team their platforms, sort of stress test their platforms to prevent them from being misused by the public to generate child sexual abuse material. That's a sort of a complicated endeavor for a variety of reasons, but it's something that we're, working hard on and from a policy perspective want to happen. the prevention work, like I said, which is very hard on a number of different dimensions, but there is an increasing focus and increasing sort of work product from experts around the country being pushed out to schools and school-based professionals on, again, how we can help kids keep themselves safe, how we can help parents and caregivers and others in kids' lives keep kids safe. And so those are sort of policy initiatives, I think, that are starting to come to fruition, that are going to be really important to sort of that we all build on in the coming years. But there's a start, for sure.
So actually, I've been pretty impressed over the course of the last 2 years-ish of the surge of thought and policymaking around AI risk, more so than in any other area. And I don't think it's just a bandwagon effect that everybody wants to get on board. They see a major opportunity and a major challenge and want to get their hands around it. So things happening within national governments, things like the executive order and the various implementation efforts around that, the EU, cyber AI Act and the work there. There's also non-governmental organizations like the World Economic Forum has a massive AI governance working group with sub-working groups on various things. I'm on a safe systems and technologies working group looking at how to actually, think about and design some safeguards. And so there's a lot happening all over the place. And now the question is, are we working quickly enough? But it's not for lack of trying. It's actually quite impressive how much attention is going into this topic.
Yeah, it's like this delicate balance where you want to allow innovation to happen. You also want healthy competition. So you don't want to put heavy restricted policies out there to reduce your innovation at any cost. I would definitely say that's something I've also seen is that you have all these organizations and you have companies, startups talking with legislators, and legislators are really taking the time, their staff, to look into AI and how do we improve the situation. And I really do applaud them. I think one of the concerns I do have on this front, though, is that, for example, so Colorado came out with their own recently, and this becomes a concern because if each state comes out with their own, this may be a problem for security leaders to ensure that they're being compliant. So I think what we need to do is really come together and work as best as we can to ensure that we can all be compliant, but also to ensure that there's transparency as well.
I want to try to leave some time for questions at the end. I have a couple that I think the panel might want to address. But before we get there, I want to make sure that our discussion ends on a positive note. So what are we doing right here? What are we doing right about addressing AI-enabled crime? Really?
No. Good question. Again, in our space in particular, in the child exploitation space, it's a lot of what I said. There's a lot of understanding of the problem, and that is in turn generating sort of a flood of resources to deal with that problem, both on the sort of what I'll call the reactive end, the investigation and prosecution side, but also on the front end, the protective end, with the prevention efforts, with the sort of safety by design engagement with technology companies. The department, and that's just in our space, the department is also bringing all kinds of resources to bear from all different subject matter experts, attorneys, technologists, and others, to make sure that we have the sort of best possible thinking on understanding the scope of the problem and being creative in our thinking, collaborative in our efforts to work across the department, across the federal government to address these harms. And so, I can't say I'm particularly optimistic about the nature and extent of the harms that are being inflicted on kids right now, but I am optimistic about the way in which government and schools and NGOs and other state and locals and others are sort of combining together to confront this problem.
So in addition to what I said earlier about just the right attention is on this problem, there's also a lot of people thinking creatively and innovating on how AI can help make our lives better. make it more efficient. And so there's unbelievable potential there. And I think we're already experiencing it just in the basic everyday of how do I access information and get answers to questions that we have. There's an incredible opportunity in the cybersecurity space to harness AI to make network defenses better, faster, to help on the workforce side, where right now kind of the challenge at the first level, security operations center type of roles, they're just flooded with information and alerts, and AI can actually help to deal with some of that. In fact, replacing at the lowest level some of the basic functions, drudgery work that humans have had to do, and to do that much more efficiently, kind of freeing up human capital to work on problems at a higher level that they enjoy doing better. So I think there's lots of upside, and on the workforce side, that there's certainly plenty there too.
I would say seeing people volunteering their time to try to understand and work with entities that are really needed, such as like MITRE Atlas or NIST. These are great organizations that are working with the public to help them. And it's so nice to see a community coming together, trying to resolve the situation, work together, and also it's something that's nonpartisan, which makes things a lot easier to work on and move faster as well.
Yeah, I want to echo what Ross said. To the extent he was talking about child exploitation, I think you're seeing the same thing in other places, and I've been really inspired by people across the department components coming forward who have the will and the interest and the energy to take on some of these incredibly hard problems and to do it in a coordinating way. You are seeing quality coordination across agencies and components of the department, and I think that'll make a difference, so that where we didn't have a deep bench of AI prosecutors before, we're going to get there, I think, as fast as possible.
I just to throw my 2 cents in, I do think someone who's something of a techno doomsayer, as we're operating on a system that's quite porous, that was initially engineered not to actually serve as a commercial platform, but to serve as an information sharing and research platform. We tend to let tech run free. This is the first time I can recall when there's actually been a suggestion that we pump the brakes and think. And so I think that's room for optimism. I think we have time for a couple of questions. Let's see, let me start with this one. For those working in earlier stage emerging technologies, for example, quantum technology, what are the lessons learned or steps we could or should have taken sooner? What can be done proactively versus reactively? I think this is generally sort of to deal with sort of technological issues like this in crime. Thoughts?
One of the challenges in early stage startups, where a lot of this innovation is happening, is the funding model and the maturity model of the organization doesn't lend itself well to having governance and policy people and folks that do interaction with the government. And so there's always a challenge that getting to the minimum viable product, and then all that other stuff will come later. And so sometimes then safety and security issues become a bit of an afterthought. That also exists within the trust and safety practitioner space. Early companies don't even have these teams, frankly. So it is a challenge, and even for innovators that are thinking of some of these concerns or downsides, there isn't the runway to hire people to deal with it. So that's a major challenge. In more mature organizations, they can start to think ahead and start to build some of these governance structures and to think about some of the risks and as well as opportunities and plan for those. But not a perfect answer.
Yes.
I was in front of a very wise federal judge on Monday who said to a defendant that there is right and there is wrong. And this was wrong. So I just encourage people to keep that in mind. It's not usually hard to tell what those things are. And so if you feel you need advice on that, I suppose seek good legal advice or trust and safety advice. But I don't think it's really that hard. The harms that we see are things that people can perceive and understand while they're designing them. And I just ask founders to keep that in mind as they're building tools, particularly tools that they're intending to release publicly, to consumers around the world.
So that actually touches on another question we received. A few questions that are in the Section 230 lane. but one in particular asks, are you suggesting that technology platforms should bear liability for malicious actors misusing their platforms to carry out AI-enabled crimes? I don't know if you might touch on it.
I would just say accountability is a tightrope. Like, just think about it that way. We have to try to figure out, like, okay, if I had you sign these terms and conditions and you use this product wrong, who's responsible for this? One, you probably actually, your organization knew that you had that problem in the first place that you didn't resolve. So I think it's a complicated matter, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to pass it on over to the legal side on this panel, but that's just my 2 cents.
I'm not a lawyer either, but I think that there's, it's never stopped me, right? I think over time, a kind of an expectation of due care might start to emerge, and maybe some litigation might help to clarify what that looks like. But I think organizations that are acting reasonably, they are, to the extent that they're aware of a particular risk, they're building practices around that. To the extent that they're getting a notification of fraud and misuse, that they're taking reasonable steps to prevent that, they're probably in good shape. I think to the extent that it can be shown that they're willfully blind to or just allowing their platforms to be used for criminal schemes and other harms, then I think that a case can be made that they're party to that.
Yeah, I wonder about like cybersecurity insurance, basically. If they find that you're guilty in a certain sense, that's something of interest, I'd say.
And I think our final question, it touches on a question I've heard before. In prosecuting fraud, the critical and sometimes hardest part is scienter. How is the department thinking about proving intent when a tool is making the recommendation?
I will half answer that question. The intent standards in our criminal law don't differ by case. They're the same for every case and every defendant, and they're very well laid out in law. There's been an enormous amount of research and writing by legal experts and academics about new ideas of scienter in the artificial intelligence space. That's going to take a lot of legal development or maybe statutes to change that. But what you should expect is that enforcers will want to understand how the tool works. What is the information that the AI company knows? What is the information they store? What is the information they access? And what did they say about it? I mean, that's the same thing we do, in pretty much every single white-collar case, and that will apply as well in AI.
I guess I'd also add that often it's not really the tool itself that's acting. There's an actor that is posing a question that has intent, him or herself, and that's really what you're proving. If I'm researching ransomware targets while the tool is providing me with recommendations, I am actually the driver of that process, and I intend to commit that crime, and I'm collecting information to further that. So there are ways in which this, maybe we're back to the law of the horse, this falls into the normal frameworks that we have, and this is sort of reachable, notwithstanding the technology that's in the way. Before I let you go, and this is only a little bit of a surprise, so we're sitting here today, 2024, where are we headed here? Just a lightning question down the line. Let's take us out a few years. AI and crime.
I think that we need to be a little bit more proactive at this rate. I think we've been very reactive, and I don't see any of these crimes slowing down, unfortunately. I think it will increase, and I think we need to do better as a society, especially on deepfakes, on like pornography, especially like with boys doing this to their classmates, or even, it boggles my mind that we're still here in society and we haven't done anything to address that and how that should not be allowed. And there needs to be some sort of form of accountability and a sense of punishment too as well, because these really impact women and girls for their lives.
So I'm increasingly concerned about inauthentic content. And I don't know if we're going to be able to entirely get our arms around it through things like watermarking and other content authenticity efforts. I think increased focus needs to go into identifying and making sure that the source of information is known, so that then the information itself can be judged. So that also gets into the phishing and frauds type of scenario, where if I'm getting a text message, I need to know who that's from. It's from a legitimate business or a legitimate individual who's in my contact list. So we need to get back to first principles on everything from domain name registration to email accounts, so that there are ties to actual known humans or vetted known businesses on the end, so that we can then filter everything else out. And then we'll have to be judging as to whether a viewpoint is correct, or whether that image is real or not, on the basis of the person that's on the other end, as opposed to trying to judge the content itself on its face.
For me, I would say I am hopeful and optimistic that, again, in our space, that the child-on-child sort of deep faking, that we can make a meaningful dent in that problem through education and making sure kids understand that, like, this, you can't just think of this as modern day kind of bullying, teasing, flirting, that there are real lasting consequences. I think that that's something that is achievable and that we're, actively working to achieve. I am worried more broadly that there will be a sort of constant kind of one-upsmanship between federal law enforcement solving a problem and then the offender community finding a workaround, and then fix that, and then a workaround, and that it will be this kind of constant game of back and forth, because we have, on the enforcement side, very smart, very dedicated, very creative people working on this problem. The offender community also has people who are technologically savvy, committed to their illegal acts, and so there is motivation on that side. And so I don't know how this is going to play out, but I am worried that there is going to be a kind of, we're going to have to constantly be on guard that what we're doing is working, and sort of looking around the corner to what's going to be coming next.
Alistair, you get the last word.
An optimistic one. I think it's our sense that the first generation of some of these tools, people were not thinking as much about trust and safety as they could have been. It was exciting research, it was exciting development of tools. I think over the next couple of years, you're going to see a much better emphasis on that by large, legitimate actors who are building out AI tools, because they understand there'll be scrutiny, people are talking about it, people are seeing the risks associated with that, and that would be a good thing. But I think that there'll be more emphasis on that from the provider side of things. And if we maintain the same enthusiasm in law enforcement and coordination, maybe it's a problem that we can contain.
Super. Well, if you could join me in thanking our panelists.
Let me just run through the schedule real quick, because I forgot something. We're going to have our first lightning talk. It'll be followed by another panel on AI and governance at DOJ. We'll then have lunch, and Congressman Beyer will speak. But let me ask there you are. Let me ask Claudia Quiroz to come up and talk about cryptocurrency. So please.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you all today. I'm Claudia Quiroz, a Deputy Chief of the Computer Crime and Intellectual Property Section, CSIS, and Director of the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, or NCET. I would like to thank the Center for Strategic and International Studies for hosting us, and to my CSIPS colleagues who organized the event. Today, I'm going to speak about a topic that is at the forefront of technological innovation and law enforcement: the intersection of artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and blockchain technology. These advancements are not only reshaping industries, but also presenting new challenges and opportunities for law enforcement agencies worldwide. Unlike traditional currencies, cryptocurrencies operate on decentralized networks based on blockchain technology. A blockchain is a distributed ledger that records all transactions across a network of computers. Cryptocurrencies have become a tool for various criminal activities. The anonymity and decentralization of cryptocurrencies make them attractive for illegal activities, including money laundering, ransomware attacks, and fraud. Despite these challenges, blockchain technologies also provide unique opportunities for law enforcement. The immutable nature of blockchain records means that once a transaction is recorded, it cannot be altered. This feature is invaluable for tracking and tracing illegal activities. So when one thinks about artificial intelligence, one might not readily associate it with cryptocurrency or the blockchain. But as these two things become increasingly prevalent in our society, there are opportunities for innovation and growth, but also for criminals to exploit new developments for illicit purposes. Nonetheless, AI can also be a powerful tool in the fight against cryptocurrency-related crimes. The Department of Justice has made combating crimes involving cryptocurrency and digital assets a priority and has devoted significant resources to this effort. This is not new, however. Indeed, the department has investigated and prosecuted crimes involving cryptocurrency for a long time. Year after year, the department has been taking down illicit marketplaces, cryptocurrency mixers, and infrastructure actors, and holding their operators and administrators accountable. We have pursued hackers who have stolen millions of dollars in crypto, scammers who have deprived thousands of Americans of their life savings in crypto confidence investment scams, and money laundering syndicates who have made the illicit flow of funds possible. We have also pursued illicit activity in decentralized finance, or DeFi, which is a continually growing ecosystem. We have continued to investigate and prosecute various fraud schemes involving cryptocurrency, which include complex cryptocurrency investment fraud schemes, multi-level marketing and Ponzi schemes, and market manipulation. And we have seized billions of dollars in illicit proceeds. 3 years ago, Deputy Attorney General Monaco announced the creation of the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team to tackle complex investigations and prosecutions of criminal misuses of cryptocurrency, particularly crimes, as I noted, committed by virtual currency exchanges, mixing and tumbling services, and money laundering infrastructure actors. The team combines the expertise of the Department of Justice's Criminal Division's Money Laundering and Asset Recovery Section, or MLARS, CSIPs, other sections in the division, and with the experts detailed from U.S. attorneys' offices. Department prosecutors who investigate and prosecute illicit activity involving cryptocurrency, including the attorneys on my team, have had to work to adapt to a complex and rapidly evolving environment involving novel issues. So, as we begin to see criminal actors use artificial intelligence for illicit means, we are not starting from a blank page. We are applying existing frameworks and proven legal tools to pursue new threats and hold those behind them accountable. So, what are these threats? You heard about some of them from the last panel, but I'm going to talk about those that intersect with crypto and blockchain. So artificial intelligence is a term used to refer to computer systems capable of performing tasks that typically require human intelligence. A thing to recognize here is that artificial intelligence is not on the horizon. It's not even like cryptocurrency, which in many ways is still waiting for mass acceptance. In AI, neural networks mimic the way our brains process information, allowing computers to recognize patterns and make decisions. AI is integrated into many of the tools we already use, often without us even realizing it. So many of you open your phone using Face ID. When that happens, your phone is using machine learning. It's taken an image of your face using 30,000 points of infrared light, and then comparing the scan with the image it has already stored of your face. Also, when you send an email and the email program suggests the end of your sentence, it is using artificial intelligence to determine what you are most likely to say next, based on a vast body of other text that it was trained on. And when you turn on a streaming service and the platform recommends what it thinks you will want next, it is using artificial intelligence to analyze your past viewing patterns. With data and compute resources going to the next level in terms of scale, however, AI is now becoming both more accessible and better able to perform activities that we previously only attributed to humans. Because of this, AI has become more salient than the examples I just cited to. Generative AI has made the barrier to entry much lower. Now, practically anybody can use AI, and the technology is quite good with its multi-model capabilities. This means that we can prompt a program to generate not only text, but also voice, images, and video. This has given an unprecedented scale to activities that were previously human-intensive. Naturally, criminals are leveraging these widely available AI capabilities to carry out their activities in several ways, especially in the cryptocurrency space. So first, let me give you some examples. AI has enhanced the ability to expand and create illicit economies for goods and services. This includes dark web listings, explicit deepfake generation, as we've heard discussed, creating fake identities and fake IDs to circumvent know your customer requirements, and checks at cryptocurrency services, open bank accounts, establish shell companies, and launder funds. Let me give you an example. There's an underground website called OnlyFake, which has claimed to use neural networks to generate realistic-looking photos of fake IDs for only $15. This service has a potential of radically disrupting the marketplace for fake identities and cybersecurity generally. By producing fake IDs nearly instantly, this technology could streamline everything from bank fraud to laundering stolen funds. Rather than painstakingly crafting a fake ID by hand, a highly skilled criminal profession that could take years to master, or even waiting for a purchase one to arrive in the mail with the risk of interception, this service lets essentially anyone generate fake IDs in minutes that may seem real enough to bypass various online verification systems. Much like many other financial and designated non-financial institutions, cryptocurrency exchanges require KYC checks for onboarding new users. This typically involves a built-in verification system checking new users' documents. A service like the one I just described would allow somebody to successfully step through the identity verification process on crypto exchanges. In fact, a 2023 report by an ID verification company noted that 70% of crypto companies observed an increase in the use of deepfakes for KYC, the apparent use of which, in such cases, grew by 128% from 2022 to 2023. Let me give you another example, AI-related crypto scams and market manipulation schemes. So it's really quite easy to create a token on the blockchain. Scammers have exploited this via exit scams or rug pulls. This is where the scammers drive a pipe to boost up their token price, only to sell the reserves for significant profit, and then leaving their victims out to dry. There's also market manipulation or pump and dump schemes, in which coordinated groups initiate sudden purchases and sales of tokens to make a profit. AI has also become the hype-generating target of a string of recent tokens. So there are hundreds of tokens listed on several blockchains that have some variant of the term GPT in their name. While some of these may be well-intentioned, several of them have involved scammers deceitfully claiming an official association with ChatGPT or other supposedly legitimate AI company. Another way criminals are using AI is using a combination of machine learning, computer vision, NLPs, and the latest generative AI to allow criminals to efficiently scale their illicit operations. Think about investment scams. These are as old as time. But criminals are leveraging deepfakes and AI-generated materials to impersonate celebrities or authority figures to promote fraudulent cryptocurrency schemes. This makes the scams more convincing, and thus people are more susceptible to fall for them. There's also an increase in the deploying crypto scams and disinformation at scale. Bad actors are able to upscale their operations by using AI to auto-generate text, images, websites, videos, and other content offers. This can be done through the creation of scam sites and the ability to rapidly disseminate crypto-related disinformation. For instance, in order to avoid detection or evade law enforcement, a bad actor running a scam operation may cycle through different sites with new marketing, creating a new site every time. This process can be seamless and low cost through the use of AI. In addition to sustaining the scam infrastructure, which is necessary for the scam, scammers can use AI to accelerate and upscale their outreach to potential victims in order to generate illicit proceeds. This might include voice cloning, GPT-style chat tools, as we described deepfakes, and AI-aided social engineering to bypass security measures for personalized phishing, cryptocurrency confidence investment scams, and other schemes. Another example is using large language models, LLMs, such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Mistral, Llama, et cetera, to facilitate cybercrime. As I noted, these LLMs are becoming increasingly multimodal. They're able to output not only text, but also images, audio, and video. Generative AI models are able to generate new code and check existing code for bugs. This can be exploited in the crypto space by identifying vulnerabilities at scale and facilitating cybercrime. Decentralized cryptocurrency applications and open source code to run their operations and hold user assets. Hackers have been able to exploit the transparency and open code vulnerabilities to steal billions of dollars from DeFi protocols by identifying the vulnerabilities in the code or security systems and analyzing investor behavior patterns. On the flip side, however, AI can be used to check code as an audit function. Large language models are also getting better at identifying and rejecting malicious prompts. This is the upside of all this. The Web3 ecosystem is already a space that's prone to hacks and exploits. And again, this space has been facing vulnerabilities, in addition when artificial intelligence enters the picture. This is primarily because AI adds a layer of sophistication to existing attack vectors, acting as an additional tool for bad actors. Another concern is the increasingly prevalent use of LLMs to actually write the underlying blockchain code. While this may save time between the idea stage and bringing a protocol to market, the AI-generated code may not be very secure from potential attacks or can be created with data poisoning in mind. Can AI pick up logical code bugs the same way a human can? This might prompt jailbreak attacks, which is a threat to LLMs that exploit loopholes in AI's programming to produce responses that bypass its ethical safeguards. So, to protect against these increasingly sophisticated attacks, the blockchain industry and DeFi protocols should adopt rigorous security audits, as you've heard from the panel previously. These audits must include a specific focus on AI systems, while more sophisticated encryption methods can help protect smart contracts from AI-powered cyber attacks. Redundancy and backup controls also play an increasingly important role in ensuring there is always the option to manually shut down AI systems if suspicious activity is detected. Other ways in which law enforcement can leverage AI to combat cryptocurrency-related crimes effectively include transaction monitoring and analysis. AI algorithms can analyze vast amounts of blockchain data to detect suspicious patterns and anomalies. This includes, for instance, identifying large, unusual transactions, rapid movement of funds, or transactions involving known illicit addresses. Also enhanced forensics. AI-powered tools can assist in blockchain forensics by tracing the flow of funds across multiple transactions and wallets. This can actually help uncover complex money laundering schemes and identify the ultimate beneficiaries. Also, deepfake detection. AI, typically using deep learning and specialized neural networks, can be used to detect deepfakes and other forms of digital manipulation to deceive victims and law enforcement, that are used to deceive victims and law enforcement. And finally, AI combining NLP and LLMs can scan and analyze communications on social media, forums, and the dark web to identify discussions related to illegal activities involving cryptocurrencies. So as AI technology advances, we can expect more sophisticated tools for detecting and preventing crimes. While the ability of criminals to exploit AI and crypto is vast and presents several challenges, the intersection of AI, cryptocurrency, and blockchain also presents opportunities for law enforcement to leverage these technologies to enhance their capabilities to combat financial crimes and protect the public. When Deputy Attorney General Monaco announced the creation of NSET 3 years ago, she said, as the technology advances, so too must the department evolve with it so that we're poised to root out abuse on these cryptocurrency platforms and ensure user confidence in these systems. The same principles should apply to artificial intelligence and other transformative technologies. The department will continue to be vigilant and ready to respond to new threats in the cryptocurrency space, particularly as criminal actors employ AI or other tools to enhance their schemes. Thank you again for the opportunity to engage in this discussion, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Now's a good time to take a 5-minute break if you want while we assemble panel 2, and we'll start at more or less promptly at 10:40. Thank you. More or less. If I can find the panelists. If people could go ahead and take their seats, that would be great. We can get started. All set? Let me turn it over to Chris Painter, who most of you know, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jim, and thank you guys for all being here. So you heard this morning, I'm Chris Painter. I'm a senior advisor, non-resident senior advisor at CSIS, but also long time history in the government, was a prosecutor and at Justice for many years before I moved on to the state and other things. So, and currently help run a capacity building, cyber capacity building group. So it's great to be here with you. Have a really great group of panelists, so I'll ask to introduce themselves in a moment, but I just wanted to frame this a little bit and talk about follow up on what we're doing. The first panel you heard really from was about some of the challenges of AI in terms of criminal activity and how to go after it, and that's obviously an important part. But there's the other half of the issue, which is how do you actually govern AI and how that's used in various federal agencies, including, most importantly, the Department of Justice. Now, just like you saw in that first panel, and I think Leonard set that off pretty well, talking about how everyone was very excited about AI in the beginning and then very scared of it afterwards. And that's not just true for AI. That's true for almost any technology that's out there. Technology, as we always say, is neither good or bad. It's how it's used and how it's employed. It reminds me of the internet in some ways, because I remember when I was at the State Department, Hillary Clinton, who was then the Secretary of State, gave a speech on internet freedom. And her first speech was, "The internet, yay." I mean, that would be the summary of the speech. A year and a half later, after we saw abuses by governments and things that were happening and the aftermath of the Arab Spring, she gave another speech, which I think can be summarized as the internet, So that's, I think, the issues we're facing. There are good and bad parts of this. People who know me well know that I also am a fan of cyber films, which are almost always dystopian and almost always the early ones, including the first movie where computers took over the world called Colossus: The Forbidden Project from 1970. The computers are always, the AI is always what takes over the world and is bad. But there's a good part, and certainly that we can harness the AI for good things, but importantly, having policies in place that allow us to do that is a key part of that. So, every federal agency thinks they're unique. They are to some extent, but I think justice in particular in this area is a many-faceted agency, and one that I think is particularly both challenging but also has a lot of opportunity to both use AI and to have good AI governance. Justice is not just a law enforcement and investigatory agency. It certainly is that. It's also a member of the intelligence community and a national security agency. It is a regulatory agency. It is a civil rights organization and has the Civil Rights Division. It is a corporate compliance organization. It is a consumer protection agency. It is a antitrust agency. It is really a myriad of things, and I think that poses challenges for how you look at this issue, but at the same time, I think opportunities to do with, just a couple days ago, Lisa Monaco, the Deputy Attorney General, was speaking at the Counter Ransomware Initiative meeting. And she's been having the Justice AI Initiative, she's been having a lot of meetings over the years, well even before the executive order, thinking about this AI issue. And her quote that I wanted to pull out is that DOJ needs to be leading in the responsible use of AI. Now, that's a big promise, and that's a hard thing to do given all the challenges here. And of course, the larger AI discussion in terms of how the Justice Department governs it, what the concerns and considerations are governed by the President's executive order on safe and secure and trustworthy AI, which frames all of this. The OMB guidance that came afterwards, or really about the same time, that said what agencies need to do in terms of both structure and also evaluating risks. And there are particular issues of risk for the Department of Justice in terms of its law enforcement and other missions. And then a national security memo, which hasn't happened yet, but will happen at some point. So with that context, I'd like to introduce our panel. We have two folks from the Department of Justice, one person from a nonprofit, but former experience in a lot of different areas, and also someone from the privacy and civil liberties community, too. And so what I'll ask them to do, and they're all pillars of their community, just go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Okay. I'm Peter Wynn. I'm the head of the Office of Privacy and Civil Liberties at the Department of Justice. And our job really falls into two general categories. we're responsible for evaluating new policies, new regulations, new laws, ways of doing new things to make sure that privacy and civil liberties concerns are appropriately assessed in connection with that process. But the other function that we have, and I would argue equally, if not more important function, is a compliance function, which is the responsibility for ensuring that all the components that Chris was describing, and the FBI, the ATF, Bureau of Prisons, the DEA, marshals, all the litigating components, the antitrust folks, you can go on and on, comply with the rules that are established both by Congress and through regulations and through executive orders, comply with the rules that are established that we're supposed to comply with. Because at the end of the day, the Department of Justice, in all of its different functions, depends upon the ability to access information about people. And if we don't handle that information correctly, we're going to lose the authority that we need to access that information. And so trust is mission critical. And the best way to lose trust is not to comply with the laws that have been established that you're supposed to comply with.
Well, before you get more into the substance, because I'll go to you next on that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good framing of where you sit in this
Yeah, it's
space.
about public trust.
Yeah.
And I think this conversation that we're having is one about how to maintain public trust. And you're going to lose public trust if you don't use new technologies effectively to protect the public with respect to public safety or with respect to national security and the other missions that the Department of Justice has. At the same time, you're going to lose public trust if you misuse that technology, if you're using it in a way that turns out to be irresponsible. And in connection with AI, we're obviously...
Before we get that, so I'm going to go back to you on that, but I just want to do a quick introduction of folks and then come back and do exactly what you're about to delve into.
He's excited.
He is. It's good. Good discussion. And I should, by the way, I forgot to make this announcement. Just like in the first panel, there are cards in the middle of the table for you to write down questions. We'll reserve some time at the end for questions. Really look forward to those. So please think about questions. If you already have them, write them down. If you don't have them, write them down as you get them, and we'll collect those at some point. Becky.
My turn. Hi, everybody. I am Becky. I am a senior advisor for AI. At DOJ, I work with the Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer. Before this, came from Meta, where I worked on governance and accountability issues, and before that, I was at Google in the early days of responsible AI, working on machine learning fairness and the AI principles there. I followed the call of the AI talent surge to come to government, so I was really inspired by the executive order on AI, its thoughtful and its forward-looking approach, and I came into government as a Presidential Innovation Fellow. So if anybody wants to learn more about that, let me know, but that's me.
Hi, I'm Dwayne Blackburn from MITRE, which is a not-for-profit company that operates FFRDCs for the federal government. We are prohibited from lobbying, don't develop products, don't compete with industry. We basically just help the government solve problems for a safer world. I work for a small team there that's called the Center for Data-Driven Policy. And what we do is take the insights that are about 10,000 scientists and engineers gain from their work supporting federal agencies and get that knowledge into the hands of policymakers so that they can make decisions that are evidence-based, actionable, and effective. Prior to joining MITRE, I spent 8 years at the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House as one of our assistant directors. Law enforcement was one of several portfolios and technology areas that I worked on. Prior to that, I was an R&D program manager in the Departments of Defense and Justice.
I'm Greg Nojon. I'm the director of the Security and Surveillance Project at the Center for Democracy and Technology. CDT is a Washington, D.C.-based civil rights and civil liberties organization. We've gotten into AI in a big, big way. In fact, we do a weekly meeting that we call the Big AI Meeting. It involves roughly a third of the staff because a lot of the different projects at CDT are involved in one aspect of AI or another. My piece of the pie is to try to keep government surveillance in line and to make it so that we surveil the right people and not the wrong people, and AI is going to play a part in that. Before I got to CDT 17 years ago, I was at the American Civil Liberties Union here in Washington for 12 years.
So thank you for that, and hopefully we'll have no hallucinations during this panel. But we'll first turn, Peter, to you, as you were beginning to do, to kind of give that kind of broad overview of what the kind of guardrails are and what your DOJ is thinking more generally.
Yeah, I mean, I think Greg set out the challenges, at least in law enforcement and national security, pretty effectively, which is you want to be surveilling the right people and not the wrong people. And, when information was on paper, you could lock it up and put it in your lockbox or your pocket, and you controlled the information. When it became electronic and existed in network systems, it really is more like water flowing in a river. And when you dam up a river to get electricity, you don't want to be finishing pouring the concrete before you ask how the salmon are going to get upstream. And so we're really, in connection with any new information technology, the goal is to manage the information so that the positive benefits outweigh the negative benefits, negative risks. And the challenge of any information technology is to engage in that cost-benefit analysis effectively. Hearkening back to my point about not following the law is a great way of losing public trust. Ultimately, the goal is to maintain, hopefully enhance public trust. But the challenge, one of the challenges I think that we forget with AI, because of all the hype about AI, it's so new, is that there are existing laws on the books that apply here. One of the laws that I think is among the most significant laws that you've never heard of is called the E-Government Act of 2002, which requires privacy impact assessments to be done in connection with new information technologies. Well, last I heard, AI was a new information technology. And so we've been doing, in a less organized way, assessments when AI products come on board since 2002. And we've got a structure in place involving privacy impact assessments that we've been using and developing, and we've got a system, an organizational system where each of the components, the 42 components, all have a process where they do this work. In connection with AI, where it's a transformative technology, at least generative AI in the forms that I think we're talking about. There's another definition of AI, which is I didn't think computers could do that. But we're talking about big data and generative. And there are a lot of unanswered questions, particularly how it performs in new situations, and as Greg indicated, circumstances that could significantly affect and impact individual liberties. And because of the nature of our law enforcement and national security and our litigation work, our uses of AI have particularly significant risks. It can impact people's liberty and in rights. And so the goal is the stakes are higher for our mission. And so we're holistically reviewing all of our tools and systems and data across all of the DOJ components to make sure that we're focusing on the gaps or the overlooked processes, seeking to identify the risks along the lines, establishing operational procedures to mitigate the risks. So, the thing about AI is almost by definition, generative AI highlights human ignorance. But there are a lot of risks that can be anticipated ex ante. And the goal is to try to spot those through the assessment process, and then mitigate them if you can identify them. And then as new risks you become aware of new risks, because humans are, almost a condition of knowledge is the awareness of your ignorance. And so as we become aware of our ignorance and we have opportunities to mitigate those risks in real time to try to update our operational procedures to make sure that we maintain that public trust that's so essential. Because even a dog knows the difference between tripped over and kicked. And we're going to trip over some dogs, but we don't want to be doing it on purpose, and we don't want to be doing it twice, okay? So, in terms of the structures that we now have in place, particularly the structures in the most recent EO, and I want to highlight there was a former EO at the end of the last administration that is just as important and as formative. And really more of a consensus-based approach. That EO is still in place and it's an effective EO. We use the AI in a lawful manner. We do it in connection with an appropriate evaluation of the benefits and the risks. We want to make sure that the information that's actionable is used. It's reliable and effective. It's safe. It's understandable. We use it responsibly. And probably the most important thing that we've always put in place is to make sure there's a human in the loop. By making, a scary example is facial recognition technology. The risks, I think most people are focusing on the risk, but there are significant benefits. Well, whenever, and this is generally true for how the department is approaching particularly sensitive areas of use of AI, but in facial recognition, nobody ever is allowed to act without corroborating evidence. No action is even permitted without a human in the loop, and often several humans in the loop. And that the use of this technology, and a lot of the AI technologies are treated as leads, but always requiring human evaluation, corroborating evidence, because of the high risks associated with how we use it and the kind of missions that we have. The most recent EO obviously involves the development of guidelines, the particular sensitivity to the way AI can be used to have discriminatory impacts, the challenges associated with synthetic content, including abusive and non-consensual imagery. I can go on, but the challenge on the compliance side of the house is to make sure that we're identifying all the different technologies that we're using and evaluating those technologies, applying the appropriate testing to those technologies. Becky will talk a little bit more about how we're implementing the various guidance that we received from OMB. And you mentioned the Dag Monaco's launching of the Justice AI initiative. And the goal there is to bring together all the stakeholders to really share expertise and perspectives on the positives and the negatives of AI. Because, as I said, humans are, we're conscious of our ignorance, and this is a collective process. And if you're trying to regulate a new ecosystem, you don't just try to figure it out yourself. You engage in all the stakeholders and bring in all that knowledge so that the decisions that you're making affecting people's lives are as well informed and involve as much buy-in as possible from the public. I can use examples, but I'd like to sort of stop at this point and pass it on to Becky.
Great. Well, Becky, you're the AI person. You're not an AI person, but you're the person who is on the, I guess, pointy end of the stick and helping to draft these policies and put them together. So, in that, with that framing and more kind of, concrete terms, since you're writing this thing or helping write this thing, what are the considerations you're seeing? What are you trying to capture in this? What are you trying to make sure doesn't happen? And what are you trying to make sure it does happen as you implement these policies, which will naturally be shifting, as Peter said, over time?
Yeah, for sure. And please stop me, because I can talk for a very long time and really get into the details with everyone. But I think I've been shocked as I've come into this work how similar it is to the work I've done in the past. So the basic building blocks that you need for AI governance and risk management are really outlined quite well in the memos that have been described. So the OMB memo, the most recent one in March, M2410 for those who are interested, outlines some really foundational components of good governance and risk management for AI and emerging technology. And it parallels those structures that any large, complex organization would have to build to adequately manage these technologies. You have to know what AI you have. You have to understand the risks and benefits that that AI presents. You have to understand, based on those conditions and those characteristics, again, as Peter said, the controls that you put in place in different contexts of use. You have to enable humans along the full risk management lifecycle to make decisions consistently and effectively through training or through frameworks or through policies. You have to monitor after you've deployed something and be able to respond, because even if you kick the tires, forever before these systems launch, they are prediction machines. When they take new inputs, they may produce something you didn't expect. And you have to be able to monitor for that and change your processes accordingly. And this involves both the what you use in the first place, so what AI you use, but then when you make a decision to use a certain type of AI, how you use it. So the restrictions or the controls or the different characteristics that are in place that can help manage that system. And substantively, a lot of this is unprecedented. So we're still in the very early days of this field of responsible AI and risk management, et cetera. There are a lot of existing systems, as Peter described, existing processes, infrastructure, practices that you have to integrate into to make this work part of everybody's daily life, make it second nature. But the substance of what you integrate is really on the cutting edge. So a lot of the work involves human expertise, getting the right people in a room to understand how they are making decisions and how they are making judgments. And then you break that down into repeatable frameworks or repeatable criteria. Ideally, over time, this subjective becomes more objective. So different people using different types of use cases, or the same types of use cases, can assess that system in the same way, can manage its risk in the same way, and can spot the same issues at scale across a very large organization with diverse mission statements, with diverse work, with diverse use cases. So that's very high level. Can double click into each of those areas, what an inventory is, how you collect information about AI assets, all of that kind of stuff. I'm in the weeds with that now.
Yep. I'd say that's a particularly difficult one. I was saying in the green room back that every time the government tries to inventory anything, it's almost a hopeless task because there's so much stuff that people don't know. And you being relatively new to the Justice Department, you probably have seen this yourself. So that's obviously an interesting task. Know what you have before you can actually apply these controls. Dwayne, you bring more the sort of the outside perspective. Even though you're an FFRDC that's supposed to help the government, you're trying to help the government in this area too. But you've also seen this evolve in your OSGP days and other days. You've seen this issue evolved in other contexts, so not the AI context. What advice can you give this group and also just generally about how this should be approached given that other advice? And anything else you want to say at this point?
Sure, thank you. I'm kind of the opposite of Becky here in that I can barely spell AI, but I've done tons of policy work on emerging technologies, multiple emerging technologies. So like you said, I'm kind of the outsider here in this group. So there's a few consistent things that policymakers need to keep aware of as you start to work on this. So I'm going to walk through some of those, just kind of make sure they're all aware of them. And frankly, I'm going to start with just recognizing how difficult their job is as they're developing policies on these emerging technologies in different applications, because they have information and pressures coming from all sorts of different directions, and they're actually somewhat conflicting. So real quickly, let's just kind of touch on some of those. When you're at this stage in a new technology, you're starting to see vendors and marketers promoting their products, and they're obviously going to promote the nice aspects what the technology can do and forget about sharing some information about what the negatives can be. Sometimes that's because it's so new that we don't know what the negatives are yet. But that's kind of natural that's going to happen on there. The initial users, when you're doing these things, they're used to whipping out their cell phone and everything works. They expect it to work 100% of the time, and it's going to seamlessly integrate with their existing processes. That's not going to be the case when you're at this stage in a new technology development. There's going to be complications, issues out there that you have to overcome. You got lobbying organizations out there that have their own interests in mind. Some of them try to do a good job of properly explaining the technology and the issues. Frankly, some of them are more interested in creating that emotional response so that you're against the use of the technologies. So you have to be able to assess what type of information you're getting there. Politicians, they're going to be politicians. All right, they're going to grandstand for or against the technology depending on what's happening. Sometimes it changes. Your example earlier, so that kind of happens. And then the news media, of course, when you're dealing with these types of things, they're going to be more interested in that sensationalizing or the conflict that's out there. It's a lot easier to develop that quick snippet of information that gets people's attention, and that's going to be read a lot more than, say, a 5-page analysis that really goes into depth and context. So all of that's kind of in there, and those last 3 groups, particularly at this stage in the technology evolution, there's a lot of inaccurate information out there. One of the problems that we have with generative AI actually is hallucinations. Well, we have some experience with that, looking at new technologies. Some of these entities out there that are trying to provide information out there, they don't know, they hallucinate. And so that's bad information coming in and out. Peter, you mentioned face recognition earlier. I could use that as an example. Last 20 years, the majority of policy analyses and recommendations, press articles on that technology have had massive inaccuracies in them. And so that's just an example of how difficult it is going to be for AI, because it's going to be even bigger than what we saw with face recognition. Beyond that, there are some other aspects that we always see in these emerging technologies as we're developing policies to be aware of. First off is the need to be transparent and to have public engagement. They're kind of interconnected. There's been lots of applications out there where you have non-ideal transparency, and that's created significant issues. Whereas if they had been upfront and say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're overseeing it, this is what the feedback loops are, people would have generally been okay with it. But that's an issue, and part of that, as well as the engagement aspects, you have to talk with the entities that are impacted so that they feel they have a role in determining how it's going to be used and what the oversight processes are going to be. So you really have to work on that. We talked earlier, the government has to get outside of talking to just the government. All right, that's a big problem, and it's common nature, not just in AI, but a lot of other things. Frankly, sometimes agencies make it too difficult for their experts to go and talk with non-feds. We really need to fix that. There's lots of other applications out there. It's state and local government areas, in the private sector, internationally. They have insights, lessons learned, experiences that we need to fold into our planning processes. So it's critically important to go out there. From a policy aspect, we're very, very early in AI. We have to be exceptionally careful that we don't create policies that kind of block us into different ways of doing things, or limits the ability to take advantage of new capabilities that come out as well. So that's incredibly difficult to do as you're developing policies, to both meet the needs of what you're trying to do while not restricting it overly too much. And then the final aspect that I'm going to raise here is workforce. Most of the time when people talk workforce in AI, they're talking about re-educating people to have jobs that they ask going to take over. Yes, that's important. As we're talking policy, there's another consideration that I think is important, very much often forgotten, and that's retraining the workers so that they can use the AI properly. AI is going to require an extensive amount of critical thinking and complex problem-solving skills that, frankly, our nation's educational system doesn't generally provide, and it's going to have to be something that we proactively work on, getting your folks that are going to be interacting with and leveraging the AI to understand how to use it properly.
And I think the stakeholder engagement is a key point, and certainly that's one of the reasons for having this session right now and some of the other sessions we've had. And so that's why I welcome your questions, so write down your questions for later on. It's funny, I was at a presentation on AI, and one of the academics was saying that current models have the the knowledge, not necessarily the reasoning capability of a college student. And that's going to change and get more advanced. And I said that's pretty accurate because most college students make up things when they don't know the answer. Greg, you've heard all this. You have your weekly, did you say, or weekly AI meetings, your confabs on this, and certainly you have a long history of looking at how things could be abused, what kind of controls you want to put in place, what kind of concerns you have. Can you articulate some of the concerns? I think some of them have already been hit in some of the discussion that you have, and what you'd like to see in the DOJ policy as it evolves and comes out.
Thanks, Chris.
Particularly, I know that one is there's OMB reports that are supposed to come out soon, or just maybe they're just due, but those are things that I think, as all the agencies come out with that's going to be critical to have folks look at it from the outside.
So Department of Justice, like all the other agencies in government that use artificial intelligence, are required to put out a plan that says, this is how we're going to implement the requirements of this lengthy OMB memo that identifies high-risk uses of AI, that kind of thing, and what you're supposed to do. DOJ is late. They'll have their plan out when they have their plan out. But
they're likely not the only agency, is my guess. But
yeah, they're not the only one. They're not the only one. But I think, Chris, for me, the best way to think about new technologies and how they're going to impact us is to really look at use cases that either exist or that seem logical that would be put in place. That's how I tend to analyze things. So let me imagine a scenario, not quite completely imaginary, and get you thinking about how you would want the AI to work and to be implemented. Imagine this, that there's a conflict in the Middle East. Imagine that there's a risk that out of that conflict in the Middle East, there will be a terrorist attack in the United States. And imagine that you're at the Department of Justice. Your job is to interdict that potential terrorist attack. And you have tools. One of your tools is to figure out whether a person on social media is talking about doing something like a terrorist attack in the United States. And there's a lot of information on social media. So what you want to do is analyze that information using artificial intelligence. Imagine that scenario. It's not too far from what may be happening as we speak today. What would you want to know, to be confident of, that AI was doing to make it so that that monitoring made sense, wasn't overly intrusive, and was being effective? Well, I think you'd want to do things like ensure that, first of all, it wasn't overbroad, in that everything everybody says on social media wasn't being watched all the time, wasn't being analyzed every minute. It does seem like that's Big Brother defined, at least to my mind. At the same time, you'd want the AI to pick out the communications and the communicants who are actually talking about doing something dangerous. And how would you do that? And how much data would you have to analyze to do that? And at what point would you turn from, okay, we've ingested this data, to now we're going to act, we're going to open an investigation about this person, about this activity? You'd want a human to be making those decisions, obviously, and you'd want that human to be doing some independent analysis, not just relying on what the AI says looks suspicious or ought to be monitored. You'd want to make sure that your monitoring wasn't of political activity. You weren't getting people to follow up on because of their political views, but rather because of a reasonable assessment of violence and dangerousness. And you're going to rely on AI in part to do that, but you're also going to rely on your own human decision-making and instinct and analysis. You'd want there to be an audit of the results. Did the AI identify people because of their political views? Did it identify people because of their ethnicity, their race, their religion? Or did it actually identify people who were potentially dangerous? So you'd want to audit the results, and then you'd want to be transparent about what you were doing. And you'd want to engage. And you left out the nonprofits. I mean, you want to engage the people who are involved in protecting civil rights and civil liberties.
I didn't want to be biased.
And watching the government and engage them. So that's what I'm looking for in this plan. Is this plan going to make it so that if the government is using AI to monitor social media, I'm confident that it's doing it in a way that's rights protective and not rights adverse?
Of course, and this is something I think the last panel made too, this is not just an AI issue, this is a broader issue, right? So AI may make it faster and easier, it's a tool, but these are some of the same considerations. And I'll turn back to to you guys, to both of you guys, and certainly Dwayne too, if you want to weigh in on that, and how that's being cabinet. Of course, it's also people don't like to use the words balance, but you have to have the tool being effective while at the same time getting the protections that Greg was talking about. So I'll start with you, Peter, and then go to Becky.
Thanks, and thanks, Greg, for teeing up the example of the potential terrorist attack. One thing that I think you left out in your discussion is the presence of a law that's currently and has been on the books for 50 years, Section E7 of the Privacy Act, which forbids the government to collect information about how people exercise their First Amendment rights. And that is a law not just on the books, but on the ground. And for instance, the FBI in the Domestic Investigations Operations Guide has very, very, very extensive guidance, and they do extensive yearly training with the agents on how to make sure that you're not collecting that kind of information, but you're collecting information about threats, true threats, things that are potential crimes or potential violations of law, because the statute requires only those types of activities to be done, and the collection of this information only in connection with that type of activity. And as you clearly point out, doing that is a challenge. But there has been, well, we have 50 years of practice of trying to make sure that we're not engaging in law enforcement or national security activities in a way that chill civil liberties and free expression. I'd also highlight that in connection with the Deputy Attorney General's AI initiative, we have actually met with a lot of different civil society organizations, and apologies that we didn't reach out to Center for Democracy and Technology, but we have had several meetings with civil society organizations and had a lot of different feedback, which has been very, very helpful as we're developing our ongoing policy-making process. I'm going to turn over to Becky instead of talking too much here.
I love that hypothetical walkthrough. I think you illustrated the decision points that experts make in making judgments about use cases and the balance of risks and benefits, and the different factors that are weighed in by human expertise in making those decisions. And there are a bunch of different perspectives on how to go about that type of evaluation. So legal, political, ethical, operational. NIST alone has a 147-page report on this, if you want to check it out. It's very good. I think what I'm in the business of doing is understanding how you adapt that ideal for the practical realities of a complex, large organization, and how you do that in a way that can consistently produce effective results and actually manage risk, like make sure that risk is managed. So I just jotted down some of what you said, but I think implicit in what you were describing was a use case, like a workflow, essentially. And a use case is the unit that OMB calls for us to evaluate. But what is a use case? What are the bounds of the thing you need to assess for risk? Is it a model? Is it multiple models? Is it a generative model? Is it a classifier? Is it a larger system made up of AI and non-AI components? Is it the even larger system made up of the human judgments plus the components of the technology which you described? So you have to define that, and you have to define it in a way that 100,000 people plus can report to you an AI use case, right? So that's a key thing. I think you also mentioned inputs and outputs, right? So what inputs that go into an AI system to result in outputs and result in predictions are inputs you really need to kick the tires of. And how do you do that? What is that data? How do you get into it? Peter talked about it a bit in the privacy context as well. Talked about auditing. MMO likes to call that independent evaluation. So how do you understand the risks, the benefits? How do you balance them? How do you ensure that the system works appropriately in the conditions as expected? So into the weeds there. And I'd add actually the who. So who is making these decisions? Who is making these decisions about whom? So who is the user or the impacted party that should be prioritized or concerned about in a certain context? Risk to whom? From whom? And in that, if you want to understand the risks, you have to have the right people in the room informing those conversations. You have to have a diversity of perspectives, a diversity of lived experiences informing what you do. So I didn't write down everything you said, but I hope that was my take on kind of one-to-one.
Which is transparency. And in connection with law enforcement and national security activities, as I'm sure Greg is aware, transparency is a real challenge. Because a lot of what you're engaged in, particularly when it comes to sources and methods, tradecraft, can't be disclosed publicly, because if it were, the bad guys would change their practices and evade the operational practices that you've got in place that you're trying to use to get them. At the same time, I think that, especially post-Snowden, the law enforcement and particularly the national security agencies, the U.S. intelligence community has realized that that there's a cost-benefit analysis that they were engaged in with respect to the question of transparency, that they may have been putting a thumb on the scale of non-transparency because of the desire to maintain protection of their sources and methods. And post-Snowden, I think the U.S. intelligence community in particular has realized that it's better to lose some advantages in the national security front in order to gain better buy-in and better understanding, from particularly the American people, but the U.S. intelligence community has a world public as well. It's important for us to maintain trust with our foreign partners. And so more transparency has been an insurance policy, the premiums of which I think we are now paying much more so than, for instance, almost all of our foreign counterparts. The U.S. intelligence community is probably the most transparent in the world. But it's a real challenge, and because, as you're correct, that you have to keep the buy-in of the public in a democratic society. And transparency is critical so that they can tell that an honest mistake wasn't done on purpose, and they can understand that things can go wrong. And I think that's paid huge dividends, because in connection with a lot of their activities in the last few years, when things have gone wrong, I think that the American public, the Congress, the other stakeholders are realizing that these things were inadvertent mistakes as opposed to things that were part of a deliberate policy. So the dividends pay. The insurance premiums that we're paying in transparency are paying dividends, but it's it's a real challenge always having to make sure you're striking the balance the right way between national security protection and transparency.
And Peter, as you said, I mean, it all comes down to trust, and what Becky's working on is really the core of this trust. Dwayne, you have any thoughts on this?
Just real quickly, everything they've said is very complicated, but it's even more complicated. Okay? Non-citizens become citizens. Bad guys turn into good guys or partners. That really messes up some of the constraints that you were talking through that you need to put in. And the federal government doesn't have just like one big database that has all that. It becomes a very big interagency problem to figure out how to update all that information so that we are doing the right things with the right classes of individuals.
We have about 15 minutes left. We have a couple of audience questions, but I want to go back to Greg, and also I have one other question before we get to the audience questions. Greg.
So I would just add, Peter, we might differ on how transparent the intelligence community has been since.
Well, I'm sure it's less than you'd like it.
I mean, we can't even get a number.
But you're not the one who's actually having to strike that balance.
We can't even get a number of U.S. persons who have been impacted by the major surveillance program that targets foreigners abroad. We can't even get that. I mean, that's basic transparency if you're going to reauthorize that program every few years, as Congress is doing with Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. But I hear you, and I hear a willingness to do even more engagement than you have done, and I appreciate it, and I think it'll make a difference. I will say this, all the federal agencies that have law enforcement responsibilities, they're not doing the same on AI. I've seen at DHS a heck of a lot of engagement, and a lot more transparency than I've seen at some of the other agencies that have also law enforcement activities. I'm not saying they're perfect. They do have a lot of work to do, but they're asking for help, and that's to their credit.
And I think, naturally, Becky and Peter and really everyone, this is going to be an iterative process by its nature. So even when you issue this report and the guidance and everything else, there's going to be continued engagement with stakeholders about this to monitor how effective it is and how it goes. I would assume.
I mean,
there was one other thing I wanted to mention, and that is that, as you pointed out, Chris, at the outset, DHS has a lot of hats. So some of the activities that it does on artificial intelligence will fall under this OMB guidance. But others will fall under this document that hasn't yet been released, the National Security Memo. To my mind, a lot of the activities at DOJ could fall into either basket. Terrorism, is that an intelligence kind of thing, or is that a crime fighting kind of thing? So one thing that we're asking is that DOJ put it when there's a question about whether it falls on this side of the line or that side of the line, it goes on the OMB side, because that's where there are articulated requirements for transparency, auditing, and engagement. And so that's one thing we'll be looking at when the NSM comes out in the next few weeks.
I'm sure we'll have another one of these sessions after all this comes
That's
out,
right.
maybe 6 months from now. And Becky will be really relieved when that's happened. But
well, she's going to write up all the rules, and then we're going to have to implement them.
yeah, well, that's what I was saying. I think that's going to be the trick, is writing them is one thing, implementing and compliance is the other. And I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or pointers on that before we turn to the audience questions.
Well,
I have a lot of other questions. I'm sorry this is going to be shorter than we wanted to do.
I actually see the work that I'm doing as the liminal space between the rules and the implementation, right? So there's a gray area there where you have to really develop those best practices and just
I'm
the
sorry.
content. No, I think we're on
you're
the same
Office of Legal
page.
Policy that writes the rules and leaves it up to my office to make sure people are following them. It's when I took this job, I thought I wanted to do policy, and I figured if it was 90% compliance work and 10% policy, I'd eat my spinach for 90% of the time and for the 10% of the policy work. And I was right that it was 90% compliance, but it was also 90% policy. And I also discovered that the compliance work was even more interesting for me than the policy work. because the kinds of challenges associated with what Dwayne was mentioning about, I mean, the Department of Justice has 17,000 FTEs, and if you add the contractors, it's probably close to 150,000. Getting all those people to comply with the rules. I mean, it's not like a test where you can get like, you know, 70%. I mean, that's over, 300,000 FTEs who aren't complying with the rules. You've got to get 100%. And that's the challenge. And doing that is incredibly interesting process because you're learning about why people do or don't do the requirements under the law. And training, guidance, as you say, Chris, it's an iterative process. You're issuing the guidance, you're doing the training, and you're measuring. And measure, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And then you go back and revise the guidance. You do training.
And that's why I think sessions like this, but also continued sessions and stakeholder engagement as you do that, because you always see what you see from the inside, but it's also good to get that outside perspective. I have a couple of audience questions, then I'll give everyone a chance to say their last piece, whatever it is. A couple of the audience questions really focus on the same thing, saying, this may be new, but there's a lot of experience we have in risk management. The Treasury Department has experience in risk management. The Defense Department has experience in this. How are you working with other agencies, not just with other stakeholders, but other agencies? And what we always know is a very unified federal government where everyone agrees on everything and they all talk to each other.
Not.
Sarcastically, that was said. But how's that collaboration? Because it seems like even though they have different issues and different use cases, they're facing some of the same issues.
On my side.
And I'm sure Greg agrees with this too, because he's dealing with other agencies as well.
So the nature of the program I was hired into actually is cross-agency. So the Presidential Innovation Fellows, it's an AI cohort that works at many different agencies and can share best practices and learnings across those agencies. So just a hat tip to that program. It's great. I know Peter knows it well. Additionally, there's a CIO, Chief AI Officer Council, that sits across all of the agencies, and it's encoded in, I think it's in the memo itself. But this is to promote interagency collaboration and coordination on this. Because yes, if anybody's read my early work, I took a lot of lessons from finance and from aviation and from pharmaceuticals and all of that stuff.
And I'll just add to what Becky said. One of the organizations that I think is another organ many people aren't aware of is the Federal Privacy Council, where we meet. I mean, we really have weekly phone calls or coordination, but monthly meetings of the council and the executive board of the council, and it's created a kind of culture of collaboration across the agencies. I think that the evolving world we're heading into is one where the vertical hierarchical bureaucracies are breaking down, and there's more interagency, interdisciplinary, collaborative work. I'm probably calling my counterpart at DHS up, or she's calling me up with information about what components at DHS are doing that she's not aware of, and she's calling me up about with information that I wasn't aware of that somebody at the Department of Justice is engaged in. That kind of knowledge collaboration, the best practices work. I mean, we are in touch with DHS about how they're going about implementing a lot of these ideas. And we learn a lot from the DHS folks. Hopefully, it's a reciprocal learning process. But the collaboration between the privacy offices, the civil liberties offices, the rights-based protection offices, that is increasing. You see it in task forces, for instance. And more and more and more, it's the lateral lines of communication that have proven to be the salvation of a lot of the public trust challenges that we've been faced with. more so than the traditional hierarchical top-down stuff.
Yeah, certainly that's been true in the cybersecurity area. There's much more collaboration than there used to be. Greg, you're...
I was going to say intra-government collaboration is really important, but so is external oversight.
Yep.
And it's a challenge in the criminal justice and the intelligence arena. And it's going to be a big challenge for AI as well. And we're not going to be able, sorry, don't take offense, we're not going to be able to count on the overseers that are inside the agencies to do this. We need external oversight. One idea that we've put on the table that I hope catches fire is the idea of setting up a privacy and civil liberties oversight board for agency use of AI, kind of a P-Club for AI. We have a P-Club for the counterterrorism programs, and it's independent, but located within the executive branch, has access to classified information, can do good oversight. And its reports have shed a lot of light on programs that the public wouldn't otherwise know about. We need something similar on the AI side as well.
Okay, I have to jump in since I was the general counsel of the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board when we were doing our report on the Snowden disclosures. And I've thought a lot about what Greg is saying. And I've also experienced a lot of my working with my colleagues in Europe who are independent data protection regulators. And my biggest concern about the proposal that Greg has suggested is that I think the quasi-internal people, the offices of Inspector General, GAO, they do a better job than an agency that's so-called independent, because the challenges of an independent agency with the independence that I think that Greg has in mind is you're in cosmic exile, that you really don't have enough connection to what's really going on to be able to engage in a meaningful dialogue to push things in the direction they need to be pushed. I think the OIGs have shown tremendous effectiveness. They're both internal, but they're also independent. The GAO that works for Congress also has learned a lot and has contributed substantially to this process. The P-Club, I think, is still a work in progress.
Well, I had several other questions. One was about, is there going to be an updated inventory that's going to be sent out? Use cases, people are very interested in use cases. So Becky, maybe in your final comments, I'll throw out some of the questions. In your final soiree of comments, you can maybe address these or not. We're talking about how Department of Justice and federal agencies deal with this, but obviously the Department of Justice and other federal agencies deals with international counterparts all over the world. They may not be subject to the same constraints, and you share information. How do you deal with things like that? There's just a myriad of things. We could have like a 9-hour panel, but we don't. We only have about 5 more minutes. So with that, I'm just going to ask the panelists to just quickly, any last words they might have to say. Maybe start with you, Greg, and we'll go in reverse order.
I would just say again, thank you to CSIS and for DOJ for putting on this event. And we have a lot of work to do when it comes to governing AI, particularly in the criminal justice area, and we're eager to engage.
Dwight.
Great. A couple of points. First off, loved the interagency conversation. That's basically been my career for the last 25 years. So, self-promotion. I have written a paper about how to do that in complex science and technology, free download. I just thought it'll help some of you all that are...
Not behind the paywall.
Yeah, not behind a paywall, nothing like that. The other thing that I really wanted to raise, particularly at this stage in AI, one of the most effective things we can do, both to advance the technology and to help the policy people, is to do a bunch of pilots. So go out there, try something, figure out what works, what doesn't work. The federal government in particular should be leading on pilots because they have a lot of assets that can do that, and they don't have some of the other financial considerations. But as you're doing those pilots, be strategic about it. Don't just go out there and try to do the hard thing and figure out what it does. Start with simple things. Something, for example, use AI to meta-tag documents, information in documents. Once you kind of get comfortable with that, move on to something more complicated, like triaging large data sets. Do that for a while. Then get even more complex where you're actually doing continuous review of incoming data. Doing it in this format where you're starting with some of the easier things and then growing rather than just jumping in provides tons of benefits. Incremental learning, building trust, addressing challenges as they come up, supports policy development, and then most importantly, it generates a huge amount of feedback so you can improve your policies as you go forward.
Great. Thank you, Becky.
So yes, there will be annual inventory. FYI, whoever asked that. All agencies are required to do that, so you'll see one. I think just overall, technology changes rapidly, right? People change rapidly. They find new ways to use technology. They find new ways to misuse technology. I know a lot of the conversation today has been about enforcement of AI, that kind of stuff. And government needs to be able to adapt to that. So both the processes, the technical infrastructure internally, but the humans as well. And that means making sure the people that are in government aren't multi-hatted and AI is a small piece of their work, but they're trained and can do the work well. I think Dwayne mentioned that as well. But it also means getting people in the door that have the expertise needed to do this work. So, we need adaptable systems because as we've talked about a number of times, emerging technology is going to emerge. So we need to keep ahead of that. That's, I think, the one parting thing I would share.
Great. Peter, quickly, what's your last?
It's about the human-machine interface. It's about human-centered design of that interface. And it's about making sure humans are ultimately the ones who are taking ownership of this and are consistently being held responsible. Because at the end of the day, if we lose public trust, we're dead as a democracy. And keeping those humans accountable and appropriately trained and engaged is the biggest challenge. It's also the biggest opportunity.
So, jump in real quick, 30 seconds. On that last point, MITRE and Harris did a poll of the citizenry on AI. 78% of Americans are concerned about it being used for malicious purposes. Yep. That's our starting point.
So, I think this is a great panel.
It's also an opportunity.
Yes.
It's a great, uncontrollable panel, but it's a great panel. It really highlights how important this issue is, particularly to DOJ and its mission, its perception of the public and the trust, as you mentioned. And I want to also thank CSIS and my old home, the Computer Crime and Intellectual Property section, for putting this on. I'm sure it will not be the last. So thank you for all participating. Give them a hand.
Great, thank you. We're exceptionally lucky to have Congressman Don Beyer as our next speaker. I'll note that he will take a few questions if you have time to write them out. Not a lot, but we'll screen them. Congressman Beyer is done so many things that I'm not going to read his bio. We only have half an hour. He's my congressman, which of course makes it essential that I stay in his good graces. But and I told you this morning that he is probably the only person in the Congress who's actually studying artificial intelligence seriously. So a true expert, a real leader from Virginia, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Jim, very much. Good morning. It's a big overstatement on the true expert, but I'm really pleased to be here. And I've been reading CSIS Insights for many years. My wife's done a lot of stuff here, but this is my first visit, my first opportunity to speak with you. And thank you for taking the day to do a deep dive into how AI is being used at the Department of Justice, how it can be used, its future. I wish I could say I'm some kind of expert on DOJ, but I'm in the legislative branch. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a car dealer. I don't serve on the Judiciary Committee. About the only thing I have going for me is I'm one of the very few members of Congress that's in town for this conference. So I get lots of invitations when we're at a session. But I have been long fascinated by the incredible delta between the amount of information available to us and what we can use, what we can see, what we can learn from it. The throwaway factoid, probably apocryphal, that we generated more information last year than in the first 2,000 years after Christ. Or that 85% of the data we download from our satellites every day, and I've seen 90 and 95%, never even looked at. There was an Eric Sevareid speech at William & Mary that I actually paid attention to, even though I didn't go there, 1977, 78, so long time ago, where he talked about even then, how much information there was that we could not digest. We couldn't see the causations and the correlations and just what was there before our eyes if we were only like super intelligent. So when data mining came on the scene and places like MicroStrategies got started and folks at MIT were coming up with all these really cool new algorithms, I just got really fascinated by it. I didn't do very much with it. I tried to take a course at Coursera on machine learning, Stanford. Yeah, I was really impressed with myself until I got to the first exam 3 weeks in and got a 0 because I didn't know how to code and I didn't have linear algebra. But I got to serve on the science committee for the last 8 years in Congress, which I loved. And so we were getting lots and lots of AI stuff there. So as Jim mentioned, I started to do it again, which is, it's really tough when your average competing classmate's 21 years old. But it's fun anyway. One of the small advantages for me of being an undergraduate at George Mason University is it's allowed me to be in the policy conversations on Capitol Hill. And there are many, many going on right now. We've had the AI task force for a bunch of years that I've been on, but until 2 or 3 years ago, we mostly sat around and talked about the doomer stuff, Terminator. And then with the advent of ChatGPT 3 and then 4, the conversation changed completely. And we became aware of how much artificial intelligence is already affecting all of our lives. So now there must be at least half a dozen, maybe a dozen different working groups, task forces, and the like on the Hill looking at AI. The most important one, I think, because I'm on it, is the one that Mike Johnson, our speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, our Democratic leader, appointed much earlier in this year. 12 Democrats, 12 Republicans, 24 people, led by Jay Obernolte, who's actually a machine learning master's from Caltech, so he's got some credibility. And Ted Lieu, a Democrat who majored in computer science at Stanford. So they lead us. It's about the most bipartisan thing happening on Capitol Hill. There are not, as you know, if you read the newspapers, there's not that warm a place to work. But we've done everything this year, the 24 of us together. And we're trying to be a great role model for the rest of Congress. It's been really fun because we've been able almost every week to bring in new people from all across the sector, from those that are the coders and the capitalists, the people that are worrying about IP protections, the folks from the Motion Picture Association, the artists and illustrators, the music creators, the authors, lots and lots of different people. Many people involved in CSAM and the child sexual assault material and the like. The good news is just 2 weeks ago we met before the recess ended and identified 14 different bills that we believe can pass the House, pass the Senate, put on the president's desk this year. And all 24 of us endorsed all 14 bills. I think we're all co-sponsors on all of them. We're planning an AI day, AI week, probably sometime after the election to pass them all. Many of them passed the Senate already. So we're trying to be the opposite of what we did on social media, which is to say nothing. In 25 years, the only thing we can take credit for is making it impossible to sue them, and which is all the problems that come from that. Some of the things that I'm most excited about, one of the things is the Create AI Act, a very bipartisan, 2 Dems, 2 Republicans, that sets up an alternative to the 4 large language models that are out there, the 4 generative AI, OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera. The whole notion, and part of this came from Dario Gil, who's the head of research at IBM, who said, IBM's too small to compete with these big guys. And now that Elon's raised $6 billion to do his 5th one, we're thinking about how do we create one that is accessible to university researchers, to academics, to students, and to businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, the so-called democratization of AI. And that also, to the extent possible, deals with a lot of the bias problems that are natural in any AI database. We know you can't get all bias out of anything, but going in there with an open mind about especially how to deal with gender bias and race bias will be really important. So the owner of this AI new Create AI Act is the National Science Foundation, so that hopefully they will be setting it up. Sam Altman has bragged that GPT-4 was created by scanning all 6 trillion words off of the internet. But we know that all 6 trillion words are not actually true or accurate or healthy for us. One of the other important bills comes out of all of the deep fakes, and not just political deep fakes like Donald Trump hugging Anthony Fauci or Joe Biden telling people not to vote in New Hampshire, but rather the sexual assault ones. There's one high school teacher apparently in Florida who took pictures out of the yearbooks of the kids and just did a ton of child sexual assault videos and photographs of these kids. Taylor Swift, the most famous victim of this deep fakes on sexual material. But it turns out Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's on the committee, also it happened to her, and she worked together with a lot of the experts to put together the Defiance Act, which passed the Senate unanimously in July. One of the first bills that we'll probably take up in November. And it, surprisingly, before now, it is not illegal to do a sexual deepfake of a classmate or a friend or your ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend. And so this additional protection is very necessary. One of the primary reasons I got involved in artificial intelligence is 10 years ago, my Republican friend John Katko, a former Commonwealth or a district attorney, and I started a suicide prevention task force to go along with the mental health caucuses and everything else. And that number creeps up little by little. We're just shy of 50,000 Americans died by suicide last year. One of the great breakthroughs was the 988 number we all worked together to get done. We will have 7 million 988 calls on the suicide hotline this year, double what they had back when it was a 10-digit number. The average wait time now is 13 seconds, which is way, way better. But the next big step is trying to figure out what are the markers that we can find using artificial intelligence that may help us understand who's at risk ahead of time. You know, we've done a great job with pediatricians, emergency room physicians, and nurses asking people, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about killing yourself? I had something in my eye, and they asked me 3 times whether I was about to kill myself, which is wonderful. But it's the ones that we don't know. And because when you intervene, like those hotline calls, I spent an afternoon at the Lifeline in Oakton 2 or 3 years ago. They had 3,000 calls the previous year. And I'd asked how many of those 3,000 calls did the person end up dying? And the answer was 1 that they knew of. So the intervention makes an enormous difference. So the next step is how do we use artificial intelligence to predict or give us a small prediction of who might be at risk and needs an intervention. For example, one throwaway statistic is that people who die by suicide, half of them have had an emergency room visit in the previous 6 months. Another throwaway note is 75% have had a mental health visit in the previous 3 months. If we can find 18 more of those markers in the large database stuff, maybe we can drop that 50,000 number to 45 or 40,000 or even less. I'm so thrilled that you are using this for law enforcement, because when you look at the top 10 concerns that AI experts around the world have, 5 of them have to do with fraud and cheating and large criminal networks. I have a favorite example. During the COVID crisis, I'm on Ways and Means Committee. I was chairing the Joint Economic Committee at the time. We gave away or invested $800 billion with a B into those with unemployment insurance benefits. So there are places like Florida where the unemployment benefit per day was $25. It wasn't exactly working. So that $800 billion helped us get through the pandemic better than any other country in the world. However, $60 billion of it was stolen. 8%, that's maybe not that bad, but still $60 billion that went to bad guys. And most of those are not one-offs, somebody copying their cousins. It was criminal networks. So the notion of having DOJ and our district attorneys or attorney generals around the country to be able to use artificial intelligence, first to make sure that we're only giving the benefit to the people that actually deserve it, and then second, to be able to track down and to basically defeat those criminal networks. Really, really important. And then there's all the cool stuff on aging. I mean, I don't like getting older, but the thought that AI can make me look 25 again would be fun. But also on missing children, taking something that, what did Jimmy look like at 8, and now that it's 7 years later, what's he look like at 15? Or what does, Whitey Bulger look like at 48, and what did he look like at 72? AI can do a whole lot of good stuff in terms of helping clean it up. A number of the bills that we endorsed, I can't go into detail on because I'm not an expert on them, was specifically from the financial services industry, specifically about fraud and all the money that is ripped off, especially from older people. I'm so thrilled that you're doing this today. I wish, my dad was a career military police officer, but I have no law enforcement background, so I can't give you great insight into the DOJ stuff, but I'm thrilled that you're doing it. One of the bigger bureaucratic existential issues early on was, does the United States government set up a whole new major infrastructure, a whole new building full of 2,000 people just to do AI? Or do we leave it up to the Department of Defense and Homeland Security and DOJ to do their own thing? And that latter is very much the perspective that has gained ascension, because we figure the work that you're doing at DOJ is going to be very different than the work they're doing at Census, or very different than the work at Department of Defense. You're going to need to develop your own experts for the kinds of things that you need. And then we're there, hopefully, to structure the whole thing together. And the biggest way we do that, by the way, and I think our highest priority, is making sure that the federal government is funding each agency and department with the AI resources that it needs. The great challenge is that, like, I have a wonderful tech fellow who MIT, San Francisco, making tons of money, so I get him for a year. But then he's going to go make a lot more money than he can make in the federal government, probably, is how do we deal with that? And then this is the final thought. The greatest contribution the federal government is making right now is at NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology. They stood up the first and best and still the world model standards for AI. Things you can do, shouldn't do, the Bill of Rights Plus. It's called the NIST framework for AI. And now, after President Biden came out with his executive order, by the way, the largest executive order in American history, Ben Buchanan at the White House, Elizabeth Kelly at NIST, others are doing a terrific job at implementing all those different suggestions. The most important of which, I think, is setting up the Safety Center at NIST. Not just for DOJ, probably least importantly for DOJ, but for all the businesses that will be using it, to make sure that we don't travel down the most dangerous AI paths. Someday you can come. I'd love to come back and talk to you about the 12 great AI risks. But in the meantime, one of those pieces of legislation that we will pass in November, put on Biden's desk, is to institutionalize that NIST Safety Institute, which is now called the Center for Innovation, or Responsibility and Innovation in AI. Has to have a good name. But we're doing good things. Thank you very much at CSIS and at the Department of Justice for figuring out how to use this remarkable new tool. I get to talk to lots of 6th graders and 10th graders, and they're all going to live to be 120 because of the breakthroughs that are happening in medicine every single day. And I intend to live to be 100. So thank you all very much. I'll be happy to take any questions that you have.
So since we have questions, oh good, just hold your hand up and we'll get you a microphone. I'll start with a question. How do you think AI is going to change your job now? How's it going to change how we work on the Hill? And how should it change how we work on the Hill?
Well, we don't like change on the Hill. I don't actually see, well, for the most obvious change is, I'm spoiled. I'm the most spoiled member of Congress because it took me 15 minutes to get here this morning. But also means I get 120,000 emails a year because I'm the most politically sophisticated district in the country. So AI, we're not using it yet, but I suspect my legislative correspondent is starting with the first draft off of GPT-4 and the like. So that will help. It's also helping the researchers. Right now, for years, we get something new, the donkey hide problem from Yijiao out of China. And you really have to go back to CRS, the Congressional Research Service, and wait 4 or 5 weeks till they come up with a great amount of information about it. But if you can just go to the large language models and get it in 5 minutes, that will change it. The thing that we need most, though, is people who believe in shared power, people who respect each other, people that are not crazy with conspiracy theories all over the place, just diplomacy. And I don't think AI is going to change that very much.
Great. Don't be bashful. Any questions? If not, I'll do another one, which is, what do you think the changes are going to be for the business world? Because you come out of the business community. How's it going to change how people, and not so much, we all know the big tech companies, but more maybe a layer down. How's it going to change business? And will we need to change laws to address that?
There's no laws off the top of my head that come up. What I see is, our productivity rate right now is about 2.7% for this year. It's been way up the last 3 or 4 years after 2 decades of doldrums. That artificial intelligence is making us right now much more productive, which is, quite exciting. I should have mentioned that, bigger picture, none of the 14 bills that we put in place are regulatory. I mean, yeah, there's criminal penalties for some deep fakes, but there's no sense of coming in and telling businesses what they do and have to do. It's almost the diametrically opposed opposite of what the European EU Act has done, which is very regulatory. You have to license your algorithms and get permission to do this and permission to do that. And so the notion is that some regulation will be great, but we want it to be light touch. We don't want to give away the amazing amount of imagination and creativity that Americans are coming up with every day using artificial intelligence. So I think we see that in the own business. I've been away from the family car business for about 5 years, so went in there to get my new Volvo, and I didn't understand almost any of the systems they had. And everything's just so much faster, quicker, better than it was before. And what the cool part is, often the ones implementing it are immigrants from Ethiopia or South America who clearly don't have college education. So,
great, thank you. I had a joke and I can't remember what it was, so we'll skip it. But since we have a lot of DOJ people and FBI people in the room, what would you say to them about guardrails and about concerns? And some of the discussion this morning talked about the parallels with the FISA discussion.
Yeah, the guardrail that's come up most frequently is on facial recognition and body cameras. There've been, I don't know how many, but a bunch of people falsely arrested, held for 24 hours, 48 hours because their face matched. We all know how the early stuff didn't do a very good job with faces of color. So in the George Floyd Act, which passed the House, not the Senate, they actually banned the use of facial recognition cameras on law enforcement. So that's probably the biggest thing that comes up. It's interesting, one of the few places there was philosophical tension so far was over the idea of building lifelong digital IDs for individuals. Bill Foster, who is our only PhD physicist in Congress, has been pushing this for a number of years with the idea that it makes it a lot harder to steal and fraudulent if you have an ID that's digital, that's on blockchain, that can't be copied. The Republican pushback was, this is one step closer to world government. And Klaus Schwab taking over. So we got to make, it's a meaningful debate because we don't want to just, for the same reason that we've never been able to register guns, is we don't want the government to know too much about us. So.
We have one in the back.
I'd be curious where,
Could you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Galen Bernstein. I'm a trial attorney with CSIS. My question was, since you're taking courses at George Mason, I'd be curious, where do you feel that you have commonalities with your much younger classmates, and where do you feel you diverged? How has it surprised you?
I have to go to class after this. I will be the only one not in blue jeans and a t-shirt, including the professor. So they look at me weird, but they're really wonderful too. If I miss class, there's a young woman in front who takes a video of the class for me and sends it to me. So they're wonderfully friendly. I'm trying to encourage a bunch of them to apply to be interns. And it does annoy me, though, when I'm the last one to leave the midterm or the final. When they're like, 30 minutes later and they're running out of there, and it's like I'm still halfway through. But it's a very, I always thought that as I got old that I'd try to get a job at CSIS or something, be surrounded by younger people. But now I get to be on the Hill and at George Mason. And so I'm, it's a perfect world. Yeah. I haven't had those kinds of conversations with them, but I would guess not. that my sense is that they're not home really excited about the breakthroughs in pancreatic cancer, or the fact that I'm not going to have to go colonoscopy every 5 years because they can take a blood test using AI, and all the breakthroughs in healthcare alone that are so wonderful, or the whole notion that one of the most important techniques ever invented, technical breakthroughs, was management, just how you make things happen, where AI is so important. I think most of them are there thinking about what's their first job and what's their career path going to be and how do they make money and catch up with their parents. I think it's very much, they're in a different place in life. They're a more anxious place because they don't know where they're going to work, who they're going to marry, where they're going to live, and all that stuff.
I should note that the average age at CSIS is 27, which means that more than half of the staff was born after 1996. So I don't have to go far to find. But Celia, did you have a... And please,
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I'm Celia Merzbacher, Alexandria resident, so thank you. And I lead a quantum stakeholder consortium that Congress created in 2018 under the National Quantum Initiative Act, so thank you for that. It needs reauthorization, by the way. But my question is, and I'm not sure I'm going to phrase this right, but I see things like this strike that just started, and the signs that, and the writers in Hollywood, same message is like, don't let our jobs get taken away by technology. And I think they mean AI in some instances. And, our supply chain is at risk all of a sudden because of these kinds of concerns on the part of workers, advocating, collective bargaining, whatever. What's the role of government in that kind of situation?
Wow. Thank you for a very hard question. And someday, if I live long enough, I'd love to dive into quantum computing. I forget the wonderful guy over the White House at OSTP who's in charge of the quantum computing, but he spoke at the Cosmos Club recently. I was like, I didn't understand a word he said. It was just great. Very exciting. And of course, blockchain and everything goes to hell when we can do quantum computing. But to your question, today it's dock workers, but it's been many things before, it will be many things again. If you take the largest possible view, I recommend, maybe for fun, reading Mark Andreessen's speech or his manifesto on AI. It's way over the top, but it's characterized by basically the instinct that every breakthrough in technology in the history of humankind has led to more jobs than less. The agricultural revolution, we got 1% on the farms right now, but we've added 50 million jobs since 2000 or 1996. Same with manufacturing. Our manufacturing output continues to grow and grow, but we have more people now, but fewer people per unit produced by far. So will the same thing happen with AI? I think the answer is probably yes, but it's the in-between part that is going to be so hard. So one of the things that we come back to again and again is digital literacy, retraining, getting people ready for a very different society. Because the great fear and the great reality is with artificial intelligence, it will happen much faster than the agricultural revolution, much faster than the manufacturing revolution. People could be displaced, the artists, the copy editors, the longshoremen, faster than ever before. So we will have, yes, I can't tell you exactly what, but the government should and will have a great responsibility to be re-employing and re-entraining people for the jobs that we need. The fact that there's twice as many jobs advertised as people unemployed today, that we need a lot more immigrants, that the only reason we have the growth we have right now is because of the new Americans in the last couple of years. There will be jobs there. They'll just be different than the one the longshoreman used to be doing, or the photographer used to be doing. And that's a big burden on us as a society. It's also not a reason we can stop, because we can't ever stop. Yeah.
We have two.
Oh, sorry. Thanks so much for being here today. My name is Lauren Baker. I'm with the U.S. Department of Commerce, so I perhaps have a slightly different perspective on this than some of my DOJ and FBI colleagues here today. But I'd like to ask just your perspective as a legislator and the bipartisan nature of the work that you're doing to table bills on AI in Congress. I certainly receive a lot of questions about those in the my day-to-day work with my foreign counterparts in ministries of trade and ministries of ICT. But could you maybe just give some quick thoughts into how, the progress on the AI-specific legislation fits into other efforts in Congress around broader industrial policy and efforts to introduce legislation to, promote U.S. competitiveness in CETs, where you see that going in the future?
We saved the easy ones for last.
Sorry.
Secretary Raimondo's mouthpiece. I don't know how it fits in the industrial policy, other than the most obvious. The biggest industrial policy we've ever had right now is chips. We call it chips and salsa on the Hill, but the semiconductor factories that are happening all over the country. I do know in terms of Department of Commerce, one of the things huge responsibilities that you guys have a lot right now is in the Office of Space Commerce. Right now, 2020, there were 2,000 satellites in low Earth orbit. The number I heard a month ago was 6,500. We'll be at 100,000 by 2030. All the astronomers are complaining they can't see the stars. But the challenge right now for space traffic is enormous. And the only way we're going to solve that is with artificial intelligence. On the larger energy side, the thing I spend the bulk of my time on the Hill right now is trying to make fusion energy happen while we are all still young and happy and alive, rather than our grandchildren. And right now, the biggest challenges in fusion are not the science, the engineering. And the big thing helping overcome the engineering is artificial intelligence. Maybe being able to model the plaza inside a tokamak is being done with AI. And in the meantime, to make you feel optimistic, Commonwealth Fusion, outside of Boston, an MIT spinoff, will turn on its first fusion reactor in 2027, and Helion in Seattle will turn its on in 2028. That's not a long time away. And that completely changes climate change and poverty in the whole world when we actually put fusion energy from seawater with no radioactive waste on the electrical grid.
That will be a major change. Last question, please.
I am Sebastian Elbaum. I'm actually a professor of computer science at University of Virginia and a fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations this year. And I want to ask you a question about the democratization that you mentioned. I see that all the AI models are running on NVIDIA cores, which is a company primarily based in Taiwan. I see 3 or 4 major companies dominating the landscape of big models. These are private companies. And I know you mentioned this democratization bill that is coming out. I would like to hear your thoughts about the concerns that you have in spite of that bill and the timeline for this landscape to change towards democratization of these models. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. It's not just democratization of the models, but I'm, as a small business person for a long, long time, I'm very much in the democratization of business in general. I think one of the direst problems in America has been the roll-ups of virtually everything. We used to have 50 defense companies, major defense companies in Virginia, and we're down to 5 right now. They've just rolled up again and again. And what that means is less competition in so many different ways. I think, may get me, people throwing things at me, but my favorite member of the administration right now, besides Kamala Harris, is Lena Khan at the FTC, because she's trying really hard to make sure that we don't get ever more concentration. And so the concentration in the large language models is definitely a problem. One of the reasons we have the Create AI Act. But I'm hoping that we will continue to make AI as available at the small business, the medium-sized business, the homes, as much as possible. There's an interesting company out of Southern California that has a personal AI model, which I've been not time enough to pick up on yet, but actually using your own personal AI to train it on the data that you want. Whether it's your grandkids' birthdays or the book you're in the middle of. But it's a much bigger problem, which is why at DOJ, the most important assistant or deputy attorney general is the one in charge of competition.
Well, Congressman, thank you for an amazing presentation. I don't know many people who could have fielded as many questions on as many subjects as you. We really appreciate your coming here, but we don't want you to be late for class.
All right. Sure.
Oh. Sorry. Sorry, forgot my schedule. I think if you could, we have lunch in the back there for you, so feel free to grab a lunch. And if we could be back by 1 o'clock, that would be great. Thank you.